Love is the most expensive mistake I ever made. I say that as a woman of 65, with bad knees, reading glasses, and a heart that still hasn't learned how to be sensible. If you had walked into my life a year ago, you'd have found me where I am now in my memory, standing behind the counter of my antique shop, the one I built piece by piece over 30+ years. It always smells the same in there. Old wood and lemon polish. A hint of dust no matter how much I clean. The faint tick-tick-tick of a dozen mismatched clocks that never agree on the time, and the soft, tired colors of Persian rugs that have seen more feet than I can count. The glass cases gleam when the afternoon light hits them. I always liked that part. Glass that I polished with my own wrinkled hands, reflecting back a softer, kinder version of me than the bathroom mirror ever does. That day started so ordinary it almost feels insulting, knowing what was about to happen. I was trimming the stems on a bunch of grocery store daisies, slipping them into a chipped blue vase I kept by the register. Mrs. Lewis, one of my regulars, was on the other side of the counter, telling me about her grandson's piano recital. I nodded at the right moments, rearranged the flowers, listened to the clocks. Then the phone rang. Not the little cell phone I never remember to charge. The landline on the wall behind me. The one that sounds like 1992 every time it rings. That phone belonged to the shop the way the old rugs and glass cabinets did, and when it rang, it usually meant some estate sale, some box of junk someone wanted me to look at. I wiped my hands on my apron, smiled at Mrs. Lewis, and said, "Excuse me just a second." Then I answered, "Gretchen's attic, this is Gretchen." "Mrs. Cole, this is Dr. Martinez from St. Luke." The way the air changed in my chest was instant, like someone had opened a freezer door inside me. The flowers, the stories, the ticking clocks, all of it faded into a kind of hush. "Yes," I said, and my voice didn't sound like mine. "Is everything all right?" "We got Damon's results back. I'd like you both to come in today to talk." He didn't say it's bad. He didn't have to. 42 years of marriage teaches you how to hear the words people don't say. I don't remember driving to the hospital. I remember my hands on the steering wheel and Damon beside me, trying to make jokes he wasn't committed to. I remember the fluorescent lights in the parking garage and thinking they made his skin look gray. In the clinic, the air smelled like hand sanitizer and old coffee. There was that soft murmur of nurses, shoes on tile, and the rustle of paper gowns behind half-closed doors. Dr. Martinez led us into a small exam room. The paper on the table crackled when Damon sat down, and the sound made me want to apologize to him, as if I were the one who designed the whole ridiculous system. "I'll get right to it," Dr. Martinez said, folding his hands over a manila folder. His tone was careful, like every word weighed something. "The scans show a mass in your pancreas. It's cancer. Stage 3. There it was, a sentence that gutted the rest of our lives in under 10 seconds. I watched Damon's shoulders sink, just a fraction at first. His hands, big and rough from decades of work, slowly unclasped on his lap. His breath came in short, shallow bursts, like he was trying not to make a sound. Stage 3. Pancreatic. Words I had heard on television when other people's lives were falling apart. Words for someone else, not us. Dr. Martinez kept talking. Chemotherapy, surgery if possible, outcomes, survival rates. I stared at Damon's hands. How they had held our newborn son, painted our first apartment, fixed every broken shelf in my shop without my asking. Then the conversation shifted to money. The full course of treatment, including chemo, potential surgery, hospital stays. He paused, like he hated this part too. "We're estimating around $250,000. The room tilted for a second. "250, Damon repeated, like he was trying out a foreign language. "Your insurance will cover a portion," Dr. Martinez added. "We've spoken with billing. With deductibles and copays, you're looking at, well, significantly less than that, but still a substantial out-of-pocket expense." Substantial. I wished I could grab that word and throw it against the wall. How much is a life worth? Apparently, ours came with a line item and a printout. We nodded, asked the questions we were supposed to ask, took the brochures we'd never read. By the time we left, Damon's paper appointment bracelet felt like a shackle around my heart. That night, I woke up to the absence of him beside me. The digital clock read 3:07 a.m. I found him in the kitchen, sitting at the table in the dark. No lights on, just the faint orange glow from the stove clock and the outline of his shoulders hunched forward. The back door window showed the yard in shadow, the rose bushes reduced to black lumps. "Can't sleep," I whispered. He didn't look at me at first. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," I lied, sliding into the chair across from him. He stared out at the yard. "Gretch, maybe this is just my time." The words sliced through me. "Don't," my voice came out sharper than I meant. "Don't say that." He gave a tired, crooked smile. "I'm 67. I've had a good life. We raised a good boy. You built your dream. Maybe this is just the way it goes." The rage that lit inside me surprised even me. Not anger at him, but at the idea of him quietly stepping off the edge of the world while I watched. I saw our wedding day, me in a dress we could barely afford, him in a suit that didn't fit quite right. I saw Ethan's first steps, Damon crawling on the carpet, arms out, laughing. I saw the day we signed the lease on the first tiny version of the shop, when it was just 2 shelves and a folding table, and we thought we were out of our minds. 42 years of shared grocery lists and car repairs and Christmas mornings and stupid fights about nothing. You don't just call that my time and bow out. I got up and went around the table, wrapping my arms around him from behind. His body felt smaller than it used to, like the illness had already started hollowing him out. "Listen to me," I said into his shoulder. "We are not done. You are not done. I am not letting you talk like that." He rested his hand over mine. His skin was warm, but his grip was weaker than I remembered. "It's a lot of money, Gretch." "I don't care," I said, and I meant it in a way that scared me. Later, lying awake beside him, I started doing math in my head. Not the kind with coupons and grocery budgets. The kind where you weigh your entire life on a scale. We had the shop. Last time it was appraised, the realtor nearly whistled. "You know this corner lot is worth at least $400,000, right?" A developer's dream. Downtown, walkable, up and coming. The house was paid off. 2 stories, white siding that always needed repainting, a porch swing Damon hung himself. The rose garden out back that I planted 1 bush at a time, cutting my hands and not minding a bit. Easily worth $200,000, more in this market, or so people kept telling us. Assets, that's what the financial planner had called them years ago. To me, they were something else. The shop was my identity. In 1982, I started it with $300 I didn't really have, buying a few boxes of old junk from a yard sale, cleaning each piece until my fingers ached, and reselling them. For years, I worked 18-hour days, opening at 8, closing at 8, then doing inventory until midnight. The house was our nest. The creak in the 3rd stair that always gave me away when I tried to sneak down for a midnight snack. The little notch in the kitchen doorframe where we marked Ethan's height every birthday. The worn patch of carpet in front of the TV where Damon's feet always rested on Sunday afternoons. I stared at the ceiling as numbers and memories tangled together. By morning, the decision had formed in my chest like a hard, steady stone. I didn't tell Damon right away. I wanted the words to sound less like panic and more like a plan. So instead, after he fell into a restless nap on the couch, I stepped into the hallway with my cell phone and scrolled to Janet, realtor. My thumb hovered over the call button long enough for the screen to dim. Then I tapped it before I could talk myself out of it. "Gretchen," she answered, chipper as always. "How are you?" "Janet," I said, my voice thin. "I'd like to talk about selling, the shop and the house." There was a pause. "Both." "Yes," the word tasted like dust. She lowered her voice, that professional sympathy tone. "You know, once we list them, and especially once offers come in, there's no going back, right?" I looked into the living room. From where I stood, I could see Damon asleep, his mouth slightly open, one arm flung over his eyes like the light hurt. The man who held my hand in church when our son left for college. The man who still reached for me in his sleep. I know, I said. Let's start the paperwork. The next 6 weeks felt like watching someone else dismantle my life in slow motion. Developers came first for the shop. Men in slim suits and shiny shoes, walking the floors, talking square footage and zoning like they were ordering lunch. I stood behind the counter, listening. "We'll probably tear the whole thing down," one of them said to Janet. "Put in something modern, glass front, maybe apartments above." Tear it down. My 30 years of polishing glass and arranging vases and coaxing light into dusty corners, reduced to a line item in a redevelopment plan. I signed the papers anyway. My hand didn't even shake. It felt like it belonged to someone braver than me. The house went next. A young couple in their 30s walked through, holding hands, their eyes shining. "I grew up driving past this place," the woman said. "I always loved those roses." I took her out back and showed her how to prune them, how not to be afraid of the thorns. She promised she'd take care of them. I pretended not to cry when I handed her the little notebook where I kept track of when each bush bloomed. There were boxes, so many boxes. Some went to storage, some to charity, some to Ethan, who lived 2 states away and sounded guilty every time he called. "Mom, you don't have to do all this for Dad," he said. "Yes," I told him, "I do." Customers came in with tight hugs and awkward words. "We'll miss this place," they said. I smiled and thanked them and rang up their final purchases like I wasn't packing up my own lungs. Not once did I complain to Damon. Every time he tried to apologize, I shushed him. "It's just stuff," I told him, even as my heart ached. "You're not." When the last rug was rolled, the last clock taken down, when the Gretchen's Attic sign came off the front window and left a clean, pale rectangle where the sun hadn't faded the glass, we moved. The apartment we found was small and cheap, and on the second floor of a brick building that smelled faintly of someone else's cooking. 1 bedroom, a tiny galley kitchen, no yard, no roses. The view from the window was a parking lot and the back of a laundromat. I put a single rug down in the living room, the one I couldn't bear to sell. I set our coffee mugs in the cabinet. I folded Damon's sweaters into a smaller closet. The next morning, I woke up, made him oatmeal, and loaded him into the car. The drive to the hospital took 15 minutes. I knew every crack in the road by the 3rd week. My days became a rotation. Drive to chemo, sit beside him in plastic chairs, organize his meds in a plastic pill box with little letters for each day. I learned how to read lab results, how to argue with insurance on hold for 45 minutes at a time, how to smile at nurses so they remembered his name. Every night when I eased him into bed in that cramped apartment, I would look around at the bare walls and think, it's worth it. Every paper signed, every box packed, every room emptied. I traded everything I built for 42 years for the chance to keep him in this world. At the time, I believed with my whole heart that saving his life would be the best decision I ever made. I had no idea what that decision would cost me next. The seasons changed outside our window before I even realized time was moving. When Damon started chemo, the trees were still full. I remember sitting beside him in the infusion center while yellow leaves clung stubbornly to the branches in the parking lot. By the time the branches went bare, I could tell which nurse had a gentle touch and which one jabbed like they were angry at the world. My days shrank into cycles, treatment days. Good days, nausea days, lab result days. I stopped thinking in weeks and started thinking in blood counts. I learned things at 65 I never wanted to know. How to clean a port without contaminating it. How to give an injection in the belly with a needle my husband tried not to flinch at. How to count pills in my palm and arrange them in a plastic box labeled SMTWTFS like a little calendar of survival. "Deep breath," I'd say, pinching his skin for the shots. He'd grimace and mutter, "You're enjoying this." "If I were enjoying it," I told him once, "I'd aim lower." He laughed, weak but real, and I filed that sound away like something precious. Food became its own battle. I cooked bland meals the way the dietitian suggested: boiled chicken, overcooked rice, toast, applesauce, things I never would have fed him before without an apology. "Smells like hospital food," he complained one night. "That's because you're on the hospital menu," I said, setting the plate in front of him. "Today's special, anything that doesn't kill you." Most nights I ate standing up in the kitchen, too tired to sit, letting the TV in the living room murmur in the background. My back screamed by the time I lay down. My knees hated the apartment's one flight of stairs. Sleep came in torn scraps, and even when it did, I woke to check if he was breathing. And yet I refused to admit I was tired. Tired people can quit. I didn't have that option. There were moments when the distance between us closed. Late at night, when the pain climbed higher than his pride, Damon would lean into me and cry. "I'm scared, Gretch," he whispered once, his head pressed into my chest like a child. "I don't want to die." I cradled him and rocked him and stroked his thinning hair. "You're not going anywhere," I lied into his ear. "We sacrifice too much for you to die. It would be terrible manners." I believed, truly believed, that this suffering would knit us closer together. That when we came out the other side, we'd be one of those couples people pointed to and said, "Look, they survived that." Sometimes, though, I'd see him drift somewhere I couldn't follow. It was small at first. He'd sit in the recliner and stare at his phone a little too long, thumb moving over the screen, his mouth twitching with a half-smile. When I asked what was funny, he'd lock it and say, "Nothing, just a meme." At the clinic, there was a certain lift in his voice when a few of the nurses walked by. They were young, competent, full of that particular brightness healthcare workers wear like armor. One of them, Sarah, always seemed to be assigned to his section. "Morning, Mr. Cole," she'd say, pushing his IV pole with practiced ease. "Ready to kick cancer's butt today." She laughed easily at his tired jokes. When she checked his vitals, her hand lingered on his forearm a second longer than it had to. I noticed, and then immediately scolded myself. She was doing her job. He was her patient. I was being paranoid because death had been parked outside our door for months. 8 months passed that way, one drip at a time. Then came the appointment. The scans had been done the week before. We sat in Dr. Martinez's office, the two of us side by side in those uncomfortable little chairs with the metal arms. My hands were clenched in my lap so tight my knuckles hurt. Damon bounced his foot, his hospital bracelet scratching softly against the armrest. Dr. Martinez came in with a folder and a tired smile that looked different than the tired smiles I'd seen before. "Well," he said, sitting down, "for once I get to be the bearer of good news." I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "The scans look much better," he continued, turning the screen toward us. "The tumor has significantly regressed. At this point, we can call it remission." Remission. The word hit me like light. I started crying before I could stop myself. The kind of crying that comes up from somewhere behind your ribs. I covered my mouth with my hand because it felt rude to be that loud. Damon let out a strangled sound that was half laugh, half sob. He wiped his eyes quickly, like a teenage boy embarrassed to be seen crying. "We did it," he asked, his voice cracking. "We did it," Dr. Martinez said. "We'll keep monitoring, of course, regular scans, follow-ups, but today is a good day." On the drive home, Damon talked more than he had in months. "You know," he said, staring out the windshield, "maybe we should take that road trip we always talked about. Just get in the car and drive. See the Grand Canyon. Go to the beach again. Second chances, right?" I nodded, my fingers relaxed on the steering wheel for the first time in forever. "We'll do it all," I told him. "Vacations, stupid tourist photos, everything." In my chest, I repeated a silent mantra. It was worth it. Selling the shop. Selling the house. Every needle, every night on hold with insurance. It was all worth it. We had won. A few weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday evening, I was in the tiny apartment kitchen making his favorite soup. Chicken and wild rice. Real seasoning this time, not the bland, sick people version. He had enough strength now to sit at the table and scroll on his phone while I cooked. The apartment smelled like garlic and thyme. The radio played some oldies station softly. Outside, the streetlights flickered on one by one. "Smells good," he said without looking up. "Don't sound so shocked," I replied, smiling to myself as I stirred the pot. "Gretch," he said then, his voice flattening, "we need to talk." That sentence never leads anywhere good. Married women know this the way they know how long to bake a chicken or what look means, "Leave me alone at the party." My hand paused on the ladle. "All right," I said slowly. "About what?" "Sit down," he said. "I'm stirring," I answered, trying to keep it light. "If I sit, you'll be eating burnt soup." "This is important." Something in his tone made my stomach clench. I turned the burner down low, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and sat across from him. He set his phone face down on the table, like a prop in a play he was done with. He folded his hands. He looked so calm it scared me. "I want a divorce," he said. At first, my brain refused to process the words. It was like he'd suddenly started speaking German. "I'm sorry," I asked, blinking. "I want a divorce," he repeated. No hesitation, no stumble, just a simple statement like he was telling me the mail came. The room tilted. For a moment, I thought I might actually faint, something I'd never done in my life. The sound of metal hitting the floor snapped both of us. I looked down and realized the spoon had slipped from my hand and clattered against the tile. My fingers were still curled like I was holding it. I gripped the edge of the chair. Is this some kind of joke?" My voice sounded thin, far away. He shook his head. "No, I've been thinking about it for a while." "A while?" I repeated the phrase like it might rearrange itself into something sane. "You just beat cancer, Damon. We sold everything to pay for your treatment." My throat closed on the rest. His face hardened just a little. "You didn't sell everything for me," he said. "You made choices too." "My choices?" I felt something hot surge up through the shock. "I sold my shop, our home. I gave up everything to keep you alive." He flinched but didn't back down. "And I'm grateful, I am. But I can't stay in this marriage out of obligation." There was a silence, so heavy I could hear the soup simmering on the stove behind me. I swallowed, my tongue thick. "Is there someone else?" The question came out before I could decide whether I wanted the answer. He looked away. That was all I needed. "Who?" I asked, my voice suddenly very calm. "Gretch," he started. "Who?" I repeated. He rubbed his forehead, as if I were the one giving him a migraine. "Sarah." For a second, the name meant nothing. Then the image came. Bright smile, dark ponytail, cheerful scrubs, an easy laugh by the IV stand. "Sarah," I said slowly, "from the treatment center." He nodded. Pieces began to fall into place with sickening clarity. The way his eyes lit up when she walked into the room. The little private jokes they seemed to share. The texts he'd gotten during non-treatment days that made him stand and pace in the hallway. "How long?" I asked. He hesitated, then, "Since July." July. I did the math without wanting to. Mid-treatment. The same month I signed the papers handing over my shop. The same month I walked through our house with a stranger and told her how to care for my roses. While I was boxing up 40 years of our life, he was texting a woman half my age between chemo sessions. My mind went dark in a way that scared me. I wasn't thinking of road trips anymore. I was thinking of every night I lay awake listening to his breathing, every pill I lined up, every time I told myself love was worth any price. "You were sleeping with your nurse while I was selling my life to keep you alive," I said, the words tasting like metal. His jaw tightened. "It didn't start like that, we just connected. She was there in ways you were." "In ways I was," I almost laughed. "I was in that hospital every day. I was cleaning you up when you threw up. I was arguing with insurance while you napped." "She listened," he insisted. "She made me feel hopeful, young, like I wasn't just a burden." There it was, the twisted, ugly truth. I had become the nurse, the driver, the bill payer. She got to be the escape. I felt something in me crack. "So what now?" I asked. You want a divorce and what? You two ride off into the sunset in my car." He cleared his throat, shifting in his chair. "I talked to a lawyer. We'll split what's left, of course. But since the lease is in my name now and my health is still fragile, it makes sense for me to stay here." I stared at him, and me. He couldn't meet my eyes. "You'll have 30 days to find another place. After the holidays, Sarah will be moving in. It would be awkward if you were still here." Awkward. That word, after everything, nearly did me in. "This is my furniture," I said softly. "My bed, my dishes, my rug." My voice shook. "I picked this apartment because it was close to the hospital for you." "You can take whatever you want," he said quickly, as if that made him generous. "I'm not kicking you onto the street. You'll have the settlement money, plus you're resourceful, Gretch. You always land on your feet." I stared at the man I had once promised to love until death did us part, and realized that apparently the contract had an unwritten clause, or until remission and a pretty nurse. I stood up slowly, because if I moved too fast, I was afraid I'd either collapse or break something. Behind me, the soup boiled over. The smell of burning stuck to the air as I turned off the stove. Later, after he went to bed in the room I had furnished, under blankets I had bought, I stood in the middle of the small living room and looked around. I had lost my house. I had lost my shop. Now I was losing my husband too, with no money left worth speaking of. But in that moment, a thin thread of hope still held. Robert, I told myself, our son, he would understand, he would be on my side. I was wrong about a lot of things in that season of my life. That might have been the one that cut the deepest. I called Robert the next morning. I didn't sleep. I watched the gray light creep in around the blinds while Damon snored in the other room, as if he hadn't detonated a bomb in our life 12 hours earlier. By 8 a.m., I decided I couldn't carry it alone. I needed my son. I sat at the tiny kitchen table, my coffee untouched, my phone on speaker. My hands shook as I tapped his name. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" A casual question, the kind people ask before they learn their world just shifted. "No," I said, because there was no point pretending. "Can you talk?" "Sure," he replied, a hint of concern entering his voice. "What's going on? Is Dad all right?" "Your father is physically fine," I said. "They said he's in remission." "That's great," he said, relief obvious. "So what's wrong?" "He wants a divorce," I said flatly. "He's been having an affair with one of the nurses from the treatment center. Her name is Sarah. He's been with her since July. He's giving me 30 days to move out so she can move in." On my end of the line, the silence was loud. I could hear some distant noise from his office, the faint clack of a keyboard, a printer somewhere. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. "Mom, are you sure you're not exaggerating things a little?" I blinked. Exaggerating. "I'm just saying," he continued, "Dad, been through a lot. Almost dying changes people. Maybe you're reading this in the worst possible light because you're hurt." "I'm reading it in the light of facts," I snapped. "He told me, himself, he wants a divorce. He's been sleeping with her. He's kicking me out so she can move into the apartment I chose." Robert sighed, the kind of sigh you give a child who's being unreasonable. "He's not kicking you out. He's giving you time to find a place. You're making it sound like he's some kind of monster." "He is acting like a monster," I said, my voice rising. "I sold our house and my shop to pay his medical bills. I gave up everything, Robert, and he repaid me by cheating and dumping me when he got better." "You always do this," he said, and the words hit me harder than I expected. "Do what?" "Make everything about what you sacrificed," he said. "How much you did, how much everyone owes you. Dad has a right to be happy, too. You can't guilt-trip him into staying if he doesn't want to." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. Guilt-trip him. "I get that you're upset," he went on, "but calling me first thing in the morning and dumping all of this on me, expecting me to pick sides, it's a lot, Mom." "You're my son," I whispered. "Who am I supposed to call?" "You could try a therapist," he said. "Or a friend. I'm in the middle of a huge project at work. I can't be your emotional dumping ground every time something happens with Dad. Every time. As if I'd been calling him for years, crying about nothing, instead of carefully editing my pain so as not to bother him. He was still talking. Look, I talked to Dad last week. He said things have been tense. Maybe the divorce is the best thing for both of you. Did he also mention he's moving in a 30-something-year-old nurse into my living room? I asked. Was that part in the version you heard? Mom, Robert said, his voice flattening, you're being dramatic. There it was, a word that erased decades of my life in one swipe. Dramatic. I closed my eyes, in my mind. I saw myself at 23, holding him as a newborn, bone-tired and terrified. I saw myself at 30, working double shifts and still showing up to every school play. I saw every Christmas Eve I stayed up late wrapping gifts, every college application I edited, every time I emptied my own savings so he could go on trips, buy books, chase opportunities. Right, I said quietly, dramatic. I'm not saying what Dad did is perfect, he added, as if that softened anything. But he's not a villain. He almost died, Mom. If being with Sarah makes him happy, why would you want to stand in the way of that? Because I sold my life to keep him alive, I wanted to scream. Because vows are supposed to mean something. Because I thought family stood with the person on the ground, not the one doing the kicking. Instead, I said nothing. Anyway, Robert said, I've got a meeting in 5. We'll talk later when you've calmed down a bit, okay? Sure, I managed. Love you, he said automatically. Love you too, I replied, then hung up and stared at the silent phone like it had just betrayed me. Inside, something fragile collapsed. Losing Damon felt like losing a limb. Losing Robert's unquestioning support felt like losing my spine. Still, life kept coming. Even after I sold the shop and the house, I'd held onto one last piece of professional identity, my small partnership at Patterson and Associates. It was a consulting firm I joined years earlier, helping small businesses with operations and strategy. I hadn't worked full-time there in a while, but it was my last lifeline, my last tie to a world where I wasn't just someone's wife or someone's mother. When I got an email from Margaret asking if I could pop in for a quick chat, I knew it wasn't going to be a celebration. The office hadn't changed. Same framed motivational quotes on the wall. Same gray carpet that somehow managed to look both clean and exhausted. The receptionist gave me a tight smile and said, "They're waiting for you." Margaret and Susan sat side by side at the long conference table, papers neatly stacked in front of them. Between them was an empty chair. Mine. "Gretchen," Margaret said, standing to give me a hug that felt like cardboard. "How are you holding up?" "I've been better," I said, sitting down. "What's this about?" Susan folded her hands. She always did that when she was about to say something unpleasant. "We're concerned about you," she began, "about your emotional state." I almost laughed. "Join the club." "We know you've been through a lot," Margaret chimed in. "Damon's illness, the divorce, the move. It's completely understandable that you haven't been fully present." There it was, the pivot from concern to critique. Susan slid a folder toward me. "We've noticed some patterns over the last year. Missed meetings, delayed responses to clients, times when you seemed distracted during presentations." My mouth went dry. "I was at the hospital most of that year," I said. "I stepped back from lead roles. We agreed on that. You both told me to focus on Damon." "And we meant it," Margaret said quickly. "We truly did, but the firm still has to function. Our clients expect consistency. We've had to pick up a lot of slack." "So what are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew. Susan took a breath. "We think it might be time for you to step down as a partner." I stared at them. "Step down," I repeated. "We're not trying to push you out," Margaret added, which is exactly what people say when they're pushing you out. "We just think you need space to focus on your personal life without the stress of the firm on your shoulders." "And the partnership?" I asked. "My share." "We had the firm evaluated," Susan said, sliding another paper toward me. Given your percentage and recent performance, we're prepared to offer you $15,000 for your stake. 15. I squinted at the numbers. I knew the partnership was worth at least $40,000. I'd seen the financials. This wasn't generosity. It was a lowball wrapped in soft voices and practiced concern. You know that's not fair, I said quietly. Margaret leaned in, lowering her voice. We also know that you probably don't have the energy or resources to drag this through legal channels right now. We don't want that for you. This way, you get some cash in hand, and we part on good terms. Good terms. I looked at their faces, both of them older than when we first started, both of them clearly already living in a future where I wasn't there. 15,000 wouldn't fix my life, but fighting them would cost time and money I didn't have. My days were already a blur of packing, divorce paperwork, and trying not to dissolve in grocery store aisles when I saw Damon's favorite cereal. My exhaustion made the decision for me. Fine, I said. Where do I sign? They both relaxed, just a fraction. The papers were ready, of course. They'd been ready before I ever walked in. Afterward, they hugged me again. We'll always be here for you, Margaret said. Leaving the building, I knew that wasn't true anymore either. The next few weeks played out like a cruel montage. I went through the apartment with cardboard boxes, deciding what could fit into a smaller space I didn't even know the address of yet. I turned in my copies of keys, to Patterson and Associates, to the storage unit where the last of my shop inventory waited like ghosts, to the apartment Damon would now share with Sarah. I sat in front of my computer, watching my bank account balance shrink with every bill. The divorce settlement, once it arrived, was a sad little number after lawyer fees and medical debt, less than I'd made in a good year at the shop. I applied for apartments, but landlords wanted proof of income and security deposits I couldn't afford. Come back when things are more stable, one of them said, as if stability were something you could buy at the pharmacy. Friends offered couches for a few nights, but their homes were full of their own lives, their own chaos. I couldn't bear the idea of being the pitiful guest in the corner. Eventually, the end of my 30 days arrived with the precision of a deadline I couldn't negotiate. I left the apartment with 2 suitcases, a duffel bag, and a banker's box of important papers. The rug stayed. The bed stayed. The dishes stayed. I walked down the stairs without looking back. The social worker at the Maple Street shelter had kind eyes and a name tag that read Carla. So you're 65, she said, scanning the form I'd shakily filled out. Any major medical conditions we should know about? High blood pressure, I said. Arthritis. A husband with cancer who doesn't have me anymore. She gave a sympathetic little smile. You'd be surprised how many stories sound like that last part. The intake area was lit by fluorescent lights that flickered at the edges, making everything feel slightly off. Plastic chairs lined the walls. A bulletin board held faded flyers about job fairs and free clinics. The air smelled like bleach, tired bodies, and the institutional scent of processed food. It's just until you get back on your feet, Carla said, the same way you tell a child the shot won't hurt. We'll get you on the housing list. Maybe we can find a senior program with more long-term options. Okay, I said, because I didn't know how to say I've never not had an address before. I got to the line that asked for current address and stared at the blank space. For the first time in my life, I had nothing to write. No fixed address, I whispered, then scribbled it in, my hand trembling. Carla pretended not to notice. She led me down a hallway to the women's dorm. Lights out at 10, she said. Breakfast at 7. Keep your valuables on you or under your pillow. If you need anything, there's always a staff member at the desk. The dorm was one large room filled with cots. 30, at least, metal frames, thin mattresses covered in clean but worn sheets. A few women were already lying down, staring at the ceiling. Others sat on their beds, scrolling on phones, whispering to each other. I found my assigned cot, number 18, by a window streaked with old rain. I set my bag down and sat gingerly, the springs protesting. Across from me, A woman in her 40s with gray-streaked hair folded a plastic grocery bag with great care, like it was made of silk. "First night?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She nodded. "You get used to the noises, mostly snoring and crying." That night the ward dimmed at 10, but sleep didn't come. I lay on my back, staring at the cracked ceiling. Somewhere in the room, someone whispered a prayer. Someone else sniffled quietly. A few beds away, a woman snored in harsh, broken gasps. Outside, rain tapped on the window in soft, irregular rhythms. I closed my eyes and pictured my old bedroom. The one with the creaky floorboard, the quilt I'd picked out on a whim at a flea market, the nightstand Damon had built himself. Then I imagined him in that bed now, with Sarah beside him, both of them sleeping in the life I'd paid for. I had given everything I had to my husband, my son, my work. I had sold my house. I had lost my shop. I had lost my marriage. I had been pushed out of my partnership. Now I lay on a narrow cot in a room full of strangers, labeled temporarily homeless, at an age when most people are comparing cruise brochures. Is this how my story ends? I wondered, discarded by the people I sacrificed everything for. Back then, I didn't know that a very different chapter was waiting just around the corner. All I knew in that moment was the sound of rain on the window and the hollow echo of my own heartbeat in a place that didn't belong to me. 3 weeks into shelter life, I had picked up a new set of skills I never wanted. I knew how to make instant coffee taste almost drinkable, 2 packets instead of 1, a pinch of salt, steal an extra creamer from the breakfast table if the volunteers weren't looking. I could fold an entire life into a single plastic bag so it didn't bulge awkwardly under my cot. I'd learned how to stare at a spot on the wall and let my mind drift when 2 women started screaming at each other at midnight over a stolen blanket. Most of all, I learned how to protect the last tiny bit of dignity I had left. Every morning, I made my cot as neatly as my back would allow. I washed my face in the grimy bathroom sink and put on a little lipstick, the same shade I'd worn behind the counter of my antique shop. A ridiculous habit, maybe, but it was my way of telling the universe, you haven't taken everything. The TV in the common room was always on. Daytime talk shows, court shows, the news. One afternoon, the weather guy in a too-tight suit stood in front of a big red swirl on the map and used the phrase, significant weather event. At this point, he said, we're advising everyone to stay indoors if possible. High winds, heavy rainfall, potential flooding. Beside the TV, one of the shelter staff taped up a flyer. Please stay inside during the storm. No unnecessary travel. I glanced at it and thought, what exactly would count as necessary at this point? That night, my blood pressure meds rolled around again. The little orange bottle was one of the few things I still treated like gold. I'd seen enough patients in the antique shop keel over from strokes to know better than to skip them. Normally, I made sure to eat before I took them. An apple from the shelter breakfast, half a bagel, something. But the next morning, my mind was somewhere else entirely. A community center across town was holding a job fair. Nothing fancy, just part-time positions and opportunities for seniors. The kind of thing people said with a bright, patronizing smile. I'd circled the date in my mind for days. Maybe, just maybe, someone there would see more than an old woman with no address. I took my pills with a quick gulp of lukewarm water and hurried through getting dressed, my stomach empty and tight with nerves. By late morning, the dizziness started, a light, floaty feeling behind my eyes. Low blood sugar plus blood pressure meds, a combination I should have known better than to attempt. I sat on the edge of my cot, rummaging through my bag to count what I had left. $7.34. 3 crumpled ones, a couple of quarters, some dimes and nickels, my financial kingdom laid out on my palm. Okay, I muttered to myself, doing the math. Cheap sandwich, small milk. That leaves enough for bus fare if I walk halfway. It was humiliating, how far I could stretch $7.34 in my head. But dizziness plus a job fare plus an empty stomach was a recipe for passing out in front of potential employers. and I'd had enough public humiliation for one lifetime. The corner store 3 blocks away glowed like a little fluorescent cave when I pushed the door open. The bell above it jangled weakly. Inside, the air smelled like fried food, floor cleaner, and something sugary from the candy aisle. The lights were too bright, buzzing faintly overhead. A young clerk with acne scars and a nervous expression glanced up from his phone. His eyes flicked over me, the too-worn coat, the shoes that had seen better decades, the tired face. I recognized that look. It lived somewhere between suspicion and pity. "Hi," I said, because I still believed in common courtesy. "Just grabbing some lunch." "Yeah," he mumbled, looking back down. The refrigerated case hummed. I stared at the rows of sad sandwiches in plastic triangles and picked the cheapest one that didn't look like it might already be growing a new civilization. Turkey and cheese. I grabbed a small carton of milk from the bottom shelf and did the math again in my head. At the register, the clerk rang it up without comment. $6.89, he said. I handed over the crumpled bills and exact change, my hand shaking just slightly. That left me with 45 cents and the one thing he couldn't see, a $20 bill folded flat and hidden deep in the lining of my purse. My don't die money, the emergency fund. I'd promised myself I wouldn't touch it unless my life literally depended on it. I stepped back out into a sky that had turned the color of a bruise. The wind had picked up, tugging at my coat. Clouds rolled in low and fast, smearing across the horizon. I tightened my grip on the plastic bag and started back toward the shelter. I didn't make it halfway before the sky opened. Rain came down like someone had slit the bottom of a bucket. One second I was walking through a sprinkle, the next I was soaked to the skin. Thunder cracked overhead, loud enough to make my teeth vibrate. The wind shoved at me so hard I stumbled, my knee flaring with pain. "Perfect," I muttered, squinting against the water. "Of course." I ducked into the recessed doorway of a closed laundromat, pressing my back against the cool metal. Water sheeted off the awning in front, forming a little waterfall. The street was already shining with puddles, leaves skittered past like panicked birds. Lightning flashed, and for a moment the whole block looked like a black-and-white photograph. The next thunder rolled so quickly, it felt like the sky was sitting directly on the building. This wasn't just a rainstorm. This was the kind of thing that flooded basements and knocked down trees. I watched a trash can lid roll down the sidewalk like a runaway coin. Then I heard it. At first, I thought it was the wind pushing against something small, a thin, high sound, almost swallowed by the storm. Then it came again, a small, broken sob. A child, crying. Every instinct in me snapped to attention. I stepped back out into the rain, squinting, listening. The sound came from the alley beside the laundromat, where 2 big trash cans hunkered against the wall. "Hello," I called, my voice almost lost under the storm. "Is someone there?" The crying hitched, then went quiet, like it was trying to hold its breath. I moved toward the alley, my shoes splashing through water. Behind the second trash can, in a narrow wedge of space between the dumpster and the wall, I saw her. She was small, knees pulled up to her chest, arms wrapped around them. Her hair hung in wet clumps around her face. Her dress had once been something fancy, I could tell, a ruined puff of pale fabric now stained with dirt and torn at the hem. Her shoes were thin flats, soaked through. A delicate gold bracelet clung to her wrist, completely wrong for the rest of the scene. She looked like someone had picked up a child from a magazine ad and dropped her into a gutter. "Hey," I said softly, kneeling down in the dirty water so I could see her better. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." She flinched when I got close, pressing herself tighter against the wall. "What's your name?" I asked. She hesitated, her lips were blue with cold. "Charlotte," she whispered finally. "I'm lost." Her voice had that crisp, careful edge kids get from expensive schools and nannies who correct their grammar. But her hands were shaking so hard her bracelet clinked against the wet brick. "How long have you been out here, sweetheart?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "A long time. I can't find my daddy." When did you eat last? She frowned, trying to think. The men, they gave me a sandwich in a car, but it was icky. I didn't finish. That was, I don't know, before the rain. Men, sandwich, before the rain. None of that sounded good. I reached out slowly, letting her see my hands. I'm going to touch your arm, okay? Just to feel how cold you are. She nodded, barely. Her skin felt like ice. This storm is bad, I said. We can't stay here. There's a store just up the street. We can get you warm and get you something to eat. She shrank back. I can't go home, she whispered. Tears spilled over, mixing with the rain on her face. If I go back, they'll hurt my daddy. They said so. Who said that? I asked, my stomach knotting. The men, she repeated, voice wobbling. They said if I screamed or told police or went to anyone, they'd hurt him. I tried to be brave, but I'm so cold. I made a quick decision. Police could wait. Hypothermia couldn't. I shrugged off my thin jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, tugging it closed in front. The instant bite of the wind on my arms took my breath away. She looked up at me, surprised. Aren't you cold? Freezing, I said, but I'm bigger. I can handle it better. I helped her to her feet. Her legs trembled, but she stayed upright, clutching my jacket around her small frame. We stepped out into the storm together, leaning into the wind. I held her hand in a grip that said I would rather be struck by lightning than let go. The corner store bell jangled weakly as we pushed in. The clerk looked up, eyes widening at the sight of us. An old woman dripping water onto the floor and a small drowned princess in an oversized coat. You can't track that much water in here, he started, then seemed to hear himself. I mean, are you guys okay? We've had better days, I said. She needs something warm and food. His gaze softened when he really looked at her. Bathrooms in the back, he said. You can get her changed there if you want. We've got some clothes on aisle 4. Clearance stuff. I nodded, already calculating in my head. On the aisle, I grabbed the smallest t-shirt I could find, some kids' leggings that looked stretchy enough to fit, a pack of socks. Then I added a package of cookies, a small jar of peanut butter, a bottle of water. I stood there with my arms full, staring at the prices. If I used what I had left in coins and the secret 20, I'd walk out of this store flat broke. No bus fare, no backup, no don't die money. I thought about my blood pressure meds, about the shelter, about how one bad fall could be the end of the line for me. Then I looked at Charlotte, standing there in my soaked jacket, shivering, eyes too big in her pale face. If this isn't an emergency, I told myself, nothing is. In the bathroom, I peeled her out of the wet dress and shoes. She didn't complain, didn't whine, which was somehow worse than if she had. Arms up, I said gently, sliding the t-shirt over her head. I got the leggings on her, tugged the socks up over her feet. I used rough brown paper towels and the hand dryer to pat her hair as dry as I could, rubbing gently at her scalp until some color came back to her cheeks. She watched me in the mirror, eyes searching my face. There, I said finally, smoothing the t-shirt down. Not exactly a ball gown, but you look pretty good. A ghost of a smile flickered. Thank you, she whispered. At the counter, the clerk rang everything up. My heart thudded as the numbers climbed. 26.42, he said. I handed over the 20 from my purse lining and the last of my coins. My hands didn't even shake this time. It was like something inside me had already let go. Keep the change, I said, which was funny because there wasn't any. We sat in a little corner of the store, by the lottery machine, sharing cookies straight from the package and passing the water bottle back and forth. The storm still raged outside, but in here the fluorescent lights hummed and the refrigerator cases buzzed, and for the moment, we were dry. Charlotte chewed slowly, like she didn't quite trust the food. After a while, she leaned against me, small and warm now. My name is Charlotte Elizabeth, she said quietly, as if reciting something from school. Then she added, my daddy is Marcus Wellington. The name meant nothing to me at the time, just another man in a world full of them. I tucked it away anyway, like a strange button you find on the sidewalk and slip into your pocket out of habit. I had no idea that spending my last dollar on that child in a corner store was the moment my life stopped falling apart and started veering towards something I couldn't even imagine. If you'd told me that night in the corner store that I was sitting on the floor with a billionaire's daughter, I would have told you you were crazier than the woman in cot 12 who talked to the ceiling. To me, she was just Charlotte, small, exhausted, eating cookies like they were a new religion. Once the shivering stopped and some color came back into her cheeks, I started asking gentle questions. "So, Charlotte Elizabeth," I said, breaking a cookie in half and handing her the bigger piece, "where do you live?" She swung her socked feet under the plastic chair. "We have a house," she said. "It's big. Daddy says it's too big sometimes. We have 12 bedrooms and a movie room and a pool and horses at the other house." 12 bedrooms, I repeated. "That's a lot of sheet washing." She giggled a little, then sobered quickly. "My room is pink. I have stars on the ceiling that glow at night, and a canopy bed. Daddy says it's a fire hazard, but he let me keep it anyway." It was such a specific, ordinary detail that my chest hurt. "How did you end up here?" I asked softly. "In the alley." Her fingers tightened around the cookie. "I was at school," she said. "Two men came. They said Daddy sent them because he was too busy to get me. They knew his name. They knew my favorite toy. They said he'd be mad if I didn't listen." My stomach dropped. "Did they show you anything, a note, a picture?" She nodded. "They had a picture of me and Daddy at the stables. I thought it was okay." "Kidnappers, of course." "They put me in a car," she continued, voice cracking. "The windows were dark. I couldn't see out. When I asked where we were going, they said it was a surprise." Her hands started to shake again. "What happened then?" I asked. "We drove for a long time," she whispered. "Sometimes they talked on the phone. They said numbers. One of them said, 'He'll pay anything.'" Her gaze flicked to me. "That's about money, right?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Then they stopped somewhere," she went on. "They gave me a yucky sandwich. I didn't like it. It had mayonnaise." She said the word like it was poison. I fell asleep. When I woke up, we were in a different place. A house, I think. They wouldn't let me see outside. They said if I tried to run or scream, they'd hurt my daddy. If the police came, they'd hurt my daddy. If I told anyone, they'd hurt my... Her words dissolved into sobs. I put an arm around her shoulders. "It's all right," I said. "You're not there anymore." "I got away," she hiccuped. "One of the doors wasn't locked all the way. They were yelling in the other room. I just ran. I ran, and then I didn't know where I was. It was getting colder. I didn't know who to ask for help because they said. She clutched the front of my shirt like a drowning person. "They said the police would make them mad, and if they got mad, they'd hurt him. I can't let them hurt him." I felt like someone had dropped a stone in my gut. Logically, I knew what I should do. Call the police. March her into the nearest station. Get her face in front of every news camera in the city. But it's one thing to think logically. It's another thing to look into the eyes of a traumatized child who flinches at the word police, like it's a gunshot. "We're safe for now," I said slowly. "The storm is keeping most people inside. We'll wait until it passes. Then we'll find a way to contact someone who can help your dad without making you feel like you're in danger. Okay." She sniffed, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "You promise." I thought of all the promises adults had already broken for her. "I promise I'll do my best," I said. It was the only honest thing I could offer. By the time the rain slowed from apocalyptic to merely unpleasant, it was dark. The clerk, whose name tag I finally noticed said DANNY, walked over with an awkward shuffle. "We're closing in 20, he said. Then more quietly, "But I put some stuff in this bag. It's almost expired, so we'd have tossed it anyway." He set a plastic bag on the floor. A couple of sandwiches, a sleeve of crackers, 2 bananas, a threadbare fleece blanket. "Thank you," I said, my throat thick. He shrugged, looking embarrassed. "My mom would kill me if I didn't help. You can't stay here overnight, though. My boss would have a fit." "We get it," I said. "We'll figure something out." The park was a few blocks away. The storm had scrubbed the sky raw, the air smelled like wet earth and exhaust. The ground squished under our shoes. In the center of the park, there was a gazebo, white once, paint peeling now, surrounded by puddles and skeletal trees. I'd walked past it a dozen times on my way to anywhere that wasn't the shelter, never thinking I'd be sleeping there. I spread the blanket on the wooden floor. It was thin and smelled faintly of detergent and cigarettes, but it was something. "Come here," I said, sitting with my back against one of the posts. Charlotte curled up against my side like she'd known me forever, not just a few hours. I tucked the edge of the blanket around her shoulders, ignoring the ache in my hips. The park was quiet, just the dripping of water from the trees and the distant whoosh of cars on the main road. After a while, in a small voice, she asked, "Are you my guardian angel?" The question stunned me. "I'm not very angelic," I said. "I snore and my feet hurt and I cuss at the TV sometimes." She giggled, then sobered. "You found me, you gave me clothes, you used your money on me." She tilted her head up, eyes shining in the dim light. "Daddy says angels don't always have wings." I swallowed hard. "Well," I said, smoothing her hair, "if I am your angel, I'm the kind that also needs a knee replacement and a nap." She relaxed against me. It took her less than 5 minutes to fall asleep, her breath evening out, small hand still fisted in the fabric of my shirt. I stayed awake a long time, listening to the park settle around us. Somewhere not too far away, people were sleeping in real beds, under real roofs, watching real TVs. Somewhere, a man named Marcus Wellington was either frantically searching for his daughter or trying to pay to get her back. On the second day, we settled into a strange little routine. Morning, we walked back to the convenience store. Danny let us use the bathroom and didn't say anything when we hogged the sink longer than strictly necessary. Charlotte brushed her teeth with the little travel toothbrush he found for her behind the counter. We ate half a sandwich and one banana between us, saving the rest for later. My stomach complained, but watching her eat was enough to quiet it. Afternoon, we wandered the park, staying where there were people but not too many. I kept my eyes open for police cars, for familiar faces from the shelter, for anyone who looked like they were looking for us. Charlotte told me about her horses, Thunder and Daisy, her favorite tutor, Miss Rosa, and how her father made her pancakes shaped like hearts on her birthday even though the cook could have done it. "How old are you?" I asked. "9, she said proudly. "Almost 10. Daddy says I'm growing up too fast." She glanced down at her borrowed leggings and t-shirt. "I don't feel very grown-up now." "Grown-ups are just kids with bad backs and bigger problems," I said. "Trust me." Evenings were the hardest. The temperature dropped as the sun went down, and the thin blanket seemed to shrink. On the coldest night, we sat in a laundromat, pretending we were doing wash. The attendant gave us a sideways look but didn't kick us out. The dryers cast a warm, humming glow. Charlotte leaned her head on my shoulder and watched clothes spin behind glass like they were some kind of low-budget aquarium. By the third day, my body felt like it was made of rust and worry. My blood pressure pounded behind my eyes, a steady drumbeat. I rationed my meds carefully, knowing I couldn't afford a refill if I ran out too soon. We were sitting on a park bench, sharing the last of the crackers, when Charlotte stiffened beside me. "What is it?" I asked. She stared across the street, her face draining of color. "That car," she whispered. "It was near the house they kept me in, and at the gas station when I ran away. I remember the sticker on the back." I followed her gaze. A black sedan idled at the curb. Shiny, expensive, windows tinted so dark they were almost mirrors. On the bumper, a small sticker with a white horse silhouette. The car didn't move. My skin crawled. "Okay," I said quietly. "We're going to get up and walk, not run, not look at the car, just go that way." I nodded toward the opposite path, like we're going to get ice cream. Her hand clamped around mine. "What if it's them?" "Then we don't make it easy for them," I said. "Come on." We stood, walking at what I hoped was a casual pace. After a few yards, I risked a glance back. The sedan had pulled slowly away from the curb. rolling at the same speed we were walking, keeping distance, but close enough. My heart thudded in my throat. Maybe it's a coincidence, I told myself. Then I remembered all the times in life when I'd told myself that and been wrong. We turned down a side path lined with trees. The sedan didn't follow, obviously, because cars can't go on footpaths. But at the far end of the path on the street, another black car idled. Same tinted windows, same horse sticker. "Gretchen," Charlotte whispered, panic rising in her voice. "They're going to take me back." "Not if I can help it," I said, my voice much steadier than I felt. We turned again, heading toward the playground. As we came out from between the trees, I saw them. Men in dark suits, not bulky thugs, not the rough edges I'd expect from kidnappers. These looked like security or executives. Clean haircuts, earpieces, the kind of posture that says they're used to being obeyed. One of them stepped forward, hands visible, palms open. "Ms. Cole," he called. My legs almost gave out. "How do you know my name?" I demanded, pulling Charlotte slightly behind me. He stopped a respectful distance away. "My name is Agent Richards," he said. His voice was calm, professional. "I work with Mr. Wellington's security team. We've been looking for Charlotte." He glanced gently at her. "Hello, Charlotte." Her grip on my hand tightened to a painful level. "You're lying," she said, shaking her head. "The bad men said they worked for my daddy, too." Agent Richards nodded slowly. "I know they did, and I know why you don't trust me. That's why your father asked me to tell you something only he and you would know." He took a breath, then, in a surprisingly soft voice, began to sing. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." Charlotte froze. "Daddy, gonna buy you a mockingbird." Her lips parted, tears pooled in her eyes. "He sings that," she whispered, "when I'm sick, when I have nightmares." "I know," Richard said. "He sang it to you the night before your first riding lesson when you were afraid of falling. He made up a line about buying you a pony instead of a diamond ring." Charlotte's hand loosened in mine, just a little. "How do you know that?" she asked. "Because he told me," Richard said simply. "He's waiting just down the road. He hasn't slept more than an hour at a time since you've been gone." I studied him. His eyes were tired in a way makeup couldn't cover. His shoulders carried the weight of someone who'd been living on coffee and guilt. "If you hurt her," I started. "We're not here to hurt anyone," he said. "We're here to bring her home, and to thank the woman who kept her alive." Behind him, one of the black cars pulled up to the curb, different from the others. Sleeker, shinier, it practically purred. A Rolls-Royce. I recognized it from magazines people left in my shop to save for later. The back door opened before the car fully stopped. The man who stepped out didn't look like the cartoon version of a billionaire. No tux, no champagne glass. He wore dark slacks, a shirt with the top buttons undone, sleeves rolled to his forearms. His hair, streaked with gray at the temples, was a mess, like he'd been dragging his hands through it for days. But the thing that hit me hardest was his face when he saw Charlotte. "Charlie," he breathed, the word cracking. She made a sound I'll hear in my bones for the rest of my life. "Daddy." She tore her hand from mine and ran. He ran too, meeting her halfway on the grass. When he scooped her up, it wasn't graceful. It was messy and desperate. He held her like he was afraid gravity would steal her if he loosened his grip. She wrapped her arms around his neck, legs around his waist, burying her face in his shoulder. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," he kept saying, over and over, voice broken. "I should have been there, I should have protected you. I'm so sorry, baby. Thank God you're safe." "I was scared," she sobbed into his shirt. "They said they'd hurt you. I tried to be brave." "You were brave," he said, kissing the side of her head, her cheeks, her forehead. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." I stood there a few yards away, feeling like I was watching a movie through someone else's eyes. The black cars, the men in suits, the billionaire with his lost and found daughter, and me, a woman who had slept in a shelter and a gazebo in the last week, standing in shoes that still squished when I walked. After a long time, Marcus Wellington lifted his head. His gaze found me. For a second, I saw the switch flip behind his eyes, from father to man who controlled large parts of the world. He set Charlotte down gently, but kept one arm around her shoulders. "Is this her?" he asked Richards quietly. "Yes, sir," Richards replied. "Gretchen Cole. We've got footage from the corner store and the park. She took your daughter in during the storm, spent her last cash on clothes and food." Last cash? God, how much had they seen? Marcus walked toward me, bringing the storm of his presence with him. Up close, I could see the exhaustion etched into his face. The lines around his mouth looked carved there in the last 72 hours. "Ms. Cole," he said, stopping in front of me. His voice was steady, but his eyes were still wet. "I don't have words big enough for what you've done. You kept my daughter safe when I couldn't. You fed her when I didn't know where she was. You spent the last of your money on her." I swallowed, suddenly self-conscious about everything. My damp hair, my worn coat, the shelter wristband I hadn't quite managed to peel off. "Anyone would have," I started. "No," he cut in gently. "Anyone did not, you did." Charlotte had slipped free of his arm and come back to my side, slipping her hand into mine. "I told you," she said to him, like she'd been arguing this point already. "She's my angel." Something in his face crumpled for a second, then smoothed out. He straightened, as if remembering something. "What's your name?" he asked me, though he'd already been told. "Gretchen Cole," I said. My voice sounded small in the open air. "Gretchen," he repeated, like he wanted to remember how it felt in his mouth. "Please come with us." I blinked. "What?" "Back to the estate," he said. "To the house, to somewhere that isn't a park bench." His gaze flicked to the thin blanket still crumpled on the gazebo floor. "My daughter doesn't appear willing to let you out of her sight just yet." He was right. Charlotte's grip on my hand tightened. "Please," she said. "Come with us. I don't want you to go back to that place with all the beds." The shelter, the cot, the flickering lights, the forms that had no fixed address written in my own shaky hand. I looked at the Rolls-Royce, at the men in suits, at Marcus Wellington, who had enough money to put a price tag on anything. And then I looked at Charlotte, whose life I'd stumbled into on a night when I was just trying not to collapse in a storm. "Okay," I heard myself say. "I'll come for a little while." Agent Richards opened the car door. The interior glowed softly, all leather and polished details. I caught a whiff of something expensive and clean. It felt like stepping through a portal. As I climbed in beside Charlotte, my worn shoes sank into carpet that probably cost more than my first car. The door thunked shut with a sound that said this vehicle belonged to a different universe than the buses and beat-up sedans I was used to. The shelter cot, the park bench, the corner store, they all felt very far away as the Rolls-Royce pulled away from the curb. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, heart thudding, a 65-year-old homeless woman riding in the back of a billionaire's car, utterly out of place and completely stunned. I didn't know it yet, but I had just crossed the invisible line between the life that had been destroyed and the life that was about to begin. I used to think riding in a fancy car meant prom night and some boy's dad's borrowed Cadillac. The back of a Rolls-Royce is something else. The seats hugged me like they'd been personally briefed on the week I'd had. Soft leather, that faint expensive smell that said no one had ever spilled ramen back here. The city outside blurred by in streaks of gray and green, water still dripping from my hair onto carpeting that probably cost more than my old sofa. Charlotte glued herself to my side, fingers tangled in mine. Across from us, Marcus sat forward, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on her like he was afraid she'd vanish if he blinked. "Charlie," he said gently, "I need you to tell me everything you remember. I know it's hard, but the more we know, the better we can keep you safe." She stared at our joined hands, voice soft. "They came to school," she said. "Two men, they said you sent them because a meeting went long. They knew your name, they knew Thunder's name." She glanced up at him. "They showed me a picture from the stables." Marcus's jaw flexed. "That picture was on my office wall," he said, mostly to himself. Taken at the private property, they had someone inside. They drove a black car, she went on. The windows were dark. I couldn't see outside. We drove a long time. They talked on the phone. They said you'd pay anything. They said if I screamed or tried to get help, they'd hurt you. Her voice wobbled. They said if the police came, they'd hurt you worse. I'm so sorry, he whispered. His hand clenched into a fist on his thigh. I should have been there. I should have had better security at the school. I thought, he swallowed, the words cracking. I thought keeping business and family separate would protect you. What did they want? I asked quietly. Besides money. He dragged a hand over his face. Up close, he looked like a man dragged behind a truck for 3 days. Money, yes, but also leverage. My company handles several government contracts. He glanced at me. Technology, infrastructure, access to certain systems. Sensitive information, I said. He nodded once. They wanted a way in, a man with my clearance and my desperation. That's a very valuable puppet. And Charlotte was the string, I said. He closed his eyes briefly, as if the truth physically hurt. When he opened them again, the softness was gone, replaced by something hard and cold. They underestimated her, he said, and they underestimated guardian angels who hang out behind convenience stores. I shifted, uncomfortable with the praise. She did the hard part, I said. I just followed the crying. He almost smiled, almost. The car turned off the main road, tires whispering against a different kind of pavement. We passed a tall, dark fence, then slowed before an iron gate taller than any house I'd ever owned. It swung inward silently as we approached, like it had recognized us. The driveway was the kind you see in movies, long and curving, lined with old trees whose branches stretched overhead in a perfect, arrogant arch, neatly trimmed hedges, small, carefully placed lights at intervals, ready to make it all look magical at night. At the end of the drive, the house came into view. House was the wrong word. This was an estate, a mansion that had decided to have children and then attach them all by covered walkways, wings and terraces and balconies stacked and spread over what felt like an acre. A fountain in front threw water into the air like it was rehearsing for a painting. Farther off, I caught a glimpse of stables and a riding ring, white fences crisp against the green. Manicured gardens rolled out like carpets, not a weed in sight. 3 weeks earlier, my address was a cot in a room with 30 other women and a bathroom with flickering lights. Now the car purred to a stop in front of a staircase wide enough to host a graduation ceremony. Somewhere between those two places was supposed to be a life. I had apparently skipped that part. A woman waited at the top of the steps, hands clasped in front of her. Late 50s, maybe, neat gray bun, navy dress, simple pearl earrings. The kind of posture that said if this place falls apart, it won't be because of me. When we stepped out, Charlotte didn't let go of my hand. Welcome home, Miss Charlotte, the woman said, her voice warm but precise. We're very glad you're safe. Hi, Elizabeth, Charlotte said quietly, shrinking a little against my side. This is Gretchen, she found me. Elizabeth's eyes flicked to me, taking in everything. The old coat, the worn shoes, the tired face. For a moment, I braced myself for pity or disdain. What I got instead was a small, respectful nod. Ms. Cole, she said, we're very grateful you're here. Grateful was not a word I'd heard pointed at me in a while. Elizabeth runs this circus, Marcus said. If you need anything, she's the one who actually knows where it is. I do my best, she said. We've prepared a guest suite for you, Ms. Cole. I thought you might appreciate the chance to shower and rest. A shower would be, I trailed off because religious experience felt a little dramatic, even for me. Inside, the house smelled like lemon oil, something floral and money. Polished wood floors, art on the walls that didn't come from discount home stores, the kind of thick rugs that swallow your footsteps. We passed security men stationed so discreetly they were almost part of the furniture. Earpieces, watches they kept checking, eyes that never stopped moving. If the kidnappers tried this again, they'd be walking into a fortress. The guest suite Elizabeth led me to was bigger than the entire apartment I'd shared with Damon. a sitting area with 2 armchairs and a sofa, a bed that looked like it had its own weather system, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens, a bathroom with marble everything and more towels than the shelter had owned collectively. Good Lord, I breathed. You could rent this out as its own vacation cottage. If you need anything, just press the button by the bed, Elizabeth said. There are fresh clothes laid out for you. We estimated sizes, so do forgive us if we've erred. I'm not in a position to complain about free clothes, I said. Something flickered over her face that might have been amusement. Dinner is at 7, she added. Mr. Wellington may ask to speak with you beforehand if you're up to it, in the study. As long as I'm allowed to be clean and conscious, I'm up to anything, I said. When she left and the door clicked softly shut, I stood in the middle of the room for a long moment, completely still. Then I headed for the bathroom. The shower had more buttons than some of the cash registers I'd used. After a few false starts and an accidental blast of cold water that made me yelp, I figured it out. Hot water poured over me from above and from the side, jets hitting muscles I'd forgotten I owned. Shelter showers were timed, lukewarm, and stingy. This was like being forgiven by a river. I let the water run over my face and into my hair until the drain threatened to protest. Soap that smelled like something from a spa instead of institutional disinfectant. Shampoo that turned my gray hair silky instead of straw-like. Steam fogging the glass, fogging my thoughts. For a few minutes, there was no Damon, no Robert, no shelter, no Allie. Just heat and the startling feeling of being safe. Wrapped in a bathrobe that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, I stepped back into the bedroom. On the bed waited a neat stack of clothes. Soft black pants with a forgiving waistband, a cream blouse that felt like it had never met a clearance rack, and a cardigan the exact color of strong tea. Underneath, a small note in tidy handwriting. If these don't fit, I'll find others. E. They fit. Of course they fit. Elizabeth didn't look like the type to estimate and hope. Wearing something that didn't bag or pinch or carry the faint smell of bleach and strangers was unsettling, like I'd slipped into someone else's life by mistake. A knock sounded at the door just as I was debating whether to put my old shoes back on or walk barefoot forever on plush carpet. Come in, I called. Elizabeth poked her head in. Mr. Wellington would like to see you in his study, if you're ready. I've never been more ready to sit in a chair and not be in a shelter, I said. The study was exactly what I'd pictured when I imagined rich men's studies, except more so. Dark wood paneling, built-in bookshelves full of actual books, not just decorative spines, a large desk with a computer that probably required passwords just to look at, 2 leather chairs facing it, positioned for conversations where decisions changed people's lives. Marcus stood when I entered, which was something Damon had stopped doing somewhere around 1998. Gretchen, he said, gesturing to one of the chairs. Please sit. I sank into the leather. It sighed under me like it understood. He sat opposite, folding his hands. The windows behind him framed the fading light over the gardens, the sky streaked with pink and gold. The kind of view people pay money to pretend they're not impressed by. I'm going to be straightforward, he said, mostly because I don't have the energy to play games, and I suspect you'd see through them anyway. That's fair, I said. I'm fresh out of patience for polite lies. He gave a brief, tired smile. When someone suddenly appears in my daughter's life, especially under these circumstances, my security team has a job to do. Background checks, I said. The words tasted like metal. He nodded. Yes, we ran one on you, thoroughly. Heat rose in my face. So you know. I know, he said gently. About the antique shop, the sale of your house, the medical bills from your ex-husband's cancer treatment, the divorce. He hesitated. The shelter. My chest tightened. To have strangers comb through the worst parts of your life is one thing. To sit in front of a man who had probably read every humiliating line item on your personal disaster report was another. I suppose I should be grateful you didn't have me followed with a drone when I went to the bathroom, I said, trying to cover my discomfort with sarcasm. He didn't flinch. Our people specialize in finding leverage, he said. We found nothing, no criminal record, no hidden debts other than what you've already been crushed under, no history of exploiting anyone, just a woman who built something, lost it all trying to save a man who did not deserve her, and then, when she had nothing, still chose to spend her last $20 on a stranger's child. He met my eyes. There was no pity there, just a kind of clear, clinical respect. I'm sorry, he went on, that you had to be laid bare for us like that, but I needed to know you were exactly who you appeared to be. And, I asked. And you are, he said simply, a good woman who's been dealt terrible cards. My world is full of people who smile while they slide knives into your back. You're not one of them. My throat burned. I looked away, pretending to examine a painting on the wall so I didn't cry in front of yet another rich man. So, I said after a moment, what happens now? You say thank you, give me a fruit basket, drive me back to the shelter. His expression hardened. No, he said, that's not what happens now. He leaned forward, forearms on his knees, suddenly looking more like the CEO of something terrifying than a desperate father. Charlotte has been through hell, he said. She will spend years untangling the fear those men put in her head. My staff loves her. Her tutors are excellent, but none of them were there with her in that storm. None of them sat up with her in a park gazebo when she thought the whole world had forgotten her. She thinks I'm her angel, I said softly. She told me, he replied, 3 times, in between crying on my shirt. He took a breath. She needs stability, someone who is with her, not because they're paid to be, but because they already chose her when it cost them everything. A nanny can be hired. A therapist can be scheduled. But whatever bond you built with her in those 3 days is not something I can manufacture. I shifted in my seat. What are you asking me exactly? I'm asking you to stay, he said. To live here, to be not a nanny exactly, more like a companion, an anchor. You'd help with her routines, school runs, bedtime, things like that. But primarily, you'd be her safe person. The one constant who doesn't disappear when the shift ends. I stared at him. Marcus, I said slowly, I am a 65-year-old woman with arthritis and a history of poor life decisions. I am not exactly Mary Poppins. His mouth twitched. You're exactly what she needs, he said. Mary Poppins did not crawl behind trash cans in a hurricane. He picked up a folder from the desk and slid it toward me. This would be the arrangement, he said, if you say yes. I opened it. It took me a moment to understand that the numbers on the page were not typos. $200,000 a year, health care, full room and board, use of a car with a driver when needed, and then, as if someone had gotten carried away at the generosity store, a $50,000 signing bonus, payable immediately. I stared at the paper like it might bite me. This can't be right, I said. It's less than I pay some of my executives, he answered. And you're guarding something far more valuable than a quarterly earnings report. I'm not qualified, I insisted. I don't have a degree in child psychology. I don't know anything about whatever world this is. I waved a hand vaguely at the house, the grounds, the invisible pile of wealth. Your resume, he said, says you built a business from scratch, ran it for 30 years, raised a son, managed an entire household, and kept a dying man alive long enough for him to betray you. You also kept my daughter alive and emotionally intact under conditions that would have broken most adults. He held my gaze. I can hire qualifications. I can't hire trust. I can't hire the way she looks at you like the floor disappears if you walk out of the room. Silence stretched between us, thick and strange. Think of it as a job, he added. Not charity. I don't do charity. I make investments. This would be one. I almost laughed. You want to invest in a woman the world tossed out with yesterday's trash. Precisely, he said, because the world is often stupid about value. I closed the folder. The weight of it felt unreal in my hands. I don't know, I said honestly. It's a lot. I've spent the last month sleeping on cots and benches. My brain hasn't caught up to the idea of having a door that locks, let alone a companion role with a salary that looks like it belongs in someone else's life. You don't have to decide tonight, he said. Stay, rest, talk to Charlotte, talk to Elizabeth, then tell me. I exhaled, my shoulders sagging. I'd like some time to think, I said. Good, he replied. I'd worry if you didn't. A knock at the study door broke the moment. Come in, he called. Elizabeth stepped inside, composed as always, though I noticed a tightness around her mouth. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said. There's a situation at the gate. Marcus's posture changed instantly. What kind of situation? A man is there, she said. He's insisting he knows Miss Cole. He claims to be her husband. My heart lurched. Husband. Damon. For a second, the room went sideways. The leather chair, the bookshelves, the sunset over manicured lawns, all of it blurred. How he'd found me, I didn't know. But there he was, at the gates of a world he did not belong to, pounding on the edges of my maybe future. I gripped the folder in my hands hard enough to crease it. Of course he'd come. Vultures always know where new meat is. The last time I'd seen Damon, he was kicking me out of our apartment so his nurse girlfriend could move in. Now he was at the gates of a billionaire's estate, trying to get back into my life like it was a revolving door. Security footage played on a screen in a small room off the foyer. Marcus stood beside me, arms folded, jaw clenched. One of his men operated the cameras, zooming as needed. On the screen, Damon stood at the massive iron gate, soaked from lingering rain, hair flattened, shirt half untucked. He gripped the bars like a man in a prison movie, shouting at the intercom. I told you, he snapped. My wife is in there. Gretchen Cole, let me in. Ex-wife, I muttered under my breath. Get the tense right at least. Marcus glanced at me. Do you want to speak to him? He asked. Part of me wanted to turn and walk back to the guest suite, crawl into that big bed, and pretend this wasn't happening. But avoiding Damon had never actually made him go away. I should, I said. Better in front of your security than on a sidewalk somewhere. A few minutes later, I found myself on the inside of the gate, with Damon on the outside. A literal metaphor I could have lived without. There was enough space between the bars that we could see each other clearly, but not enough for him to squeeze through. 2 security guards stood a polite distance back, close enough to act, far enough to pretend they weren't listening. When he saw me, Damon's whole demeanor shifted. Gretch, he said, his voice softening like someone had flipped a switch. Thank God. He reached through the bars, as if expecting me to step closer and take his hand. I didn't. What are you doing here, Damon? I asked. His face crumpled. I've made a huge mistake, he said. I lost my mind with the cancer, the treatments. I wasn't myself. Sarah, she took advantage. I was vulnerable. I stared at him. You were vulnerable enough to cheat on the woman selling her life to keep you breathing, I said. That kind of vulnerability should be studied. He flinched, then nodded, as if accepting a deserved punch. I know. I've had nothing but time to think about it. After you left, Sarah didn't stay. She took what she could get, money, jewelry, anything, and ran off with some guy from the gym. There it was, the missing piece I hadn't known I wanted and absolutely expected. So she dumped you, I said, and took your money. Tragic. He ran a hand through his wet hair. I deserve that, but Gretch, listen, I'm broke. The medical bills, the rent, I'm 3 months behind. The landlord, about to throw me out. I can't work full-time yet. I'm still trying to recover, I thought. He looked up at the house behind me, eyes wide. I heard you were here with some rich guy. I thought maybe we could fix things, start over together, like we always have. There it was, the truth in a cheap suit. You didn't come here because you realized you love me, I said. You came because you realized you're broke and alone. He winced. That's not fair. What's not fair? I said, feeling heat rise in my chest. Is selling my house and my shop to pay your medical bills so your side piece could enjoy a nice apartment. What's not fair is you telling me I had 30 days to get out so she wouldn't be awkwardly tripping over your wife. He looked past me at the manicured lawn. You've fallen into money, Gretch, he said. I'm not stupid. You're living in some mansion now. Of course you're angry, but you've got a rich man to take care of you. Are you really going to leave your husband to starve while you play lady of the house? Ex-husband, I corrected, and I'm not playing anything. He leaned closer to the bars, dropping his voice. Come on, he said. You're 65. How long do you think this will last? When he gets bored or finds someone younger, where will you be? At least with me. You knew what you had. We have history. History, like mold. Before I could respond, footsteps sounded behind me on the gravel. Is there a problem here? Marcus asked. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Authority rolled off him like heat. Damon's eyes flicked over him, taking in the clothes, the posture, the men hovering just behind us. I saw it hit him, the realization that the rich guy wasn't just rich. He was the kind of rich that owns gates like this. You must be the new boyfriend, Damon said, trying for smug and landing in pathetic. Marcus Wellington, he said evenly. This is my property, and Ms. Cole is my invited guest. Your property, Damon repeated, glancing up at the house. Nice place. Bought yourself a charity case to go with it, huh? Marcus's expression didn't change, but the air around us cooled. Ms. Cole owes you nothing, he said. Legally or otherwise, she is not responsible for your finances, your health, or your inability to keep your vows. Damon laughed once, a bitter sound. Oh, that's rich. Literally, what is she to you then? A pet, a project. You'll keep her around until it feels weird to have someone her age at the table, then send her back where you found her. His words hit harder than they should have. The line about age wormed its way under my skin with disgusting ease. You're 65, Gretch, he said, turning back to me. Men like him don't keep women like you, not for long. When this little fairy tale ends, you'll crawl back to real life, and I might not be waiting then. For once, I said, we agree on something, you won't be waiting. Marcus stepped closer to the gate. Mr. Cole, he said, voice chilly, this conversation is over, you are trespassing. My security team will escort you off the property now. Do not come back. Damon opened his mouth, maybe to throw one final insult, then seemed to think better of it. He stepped back slowly, rain dripping from his nose. You'll regret this, he said to me, when he gets tired of you. Then he turned and walked away, shoulders slumped, heading toward a car that looked as tired as he did. That night, I couldn't sleep. The bed was too comfortable, the room too quiet, my mind too loud. Damon's words replayed in a loop. You're 65. How long do you think this will last? When he gets bored or finds someone younger, where will you be? Logically, I knew Marcus's offer was about Charlotte, not me. About a child's need, not some twisted May-December fantasy. But logic and insecurity rarely sit at the same table without throwing food. In the shaky light of 3 in the morning, the job offer began to look like a temporary goodwill gesture. A bandage before they sent me back into the world, slightly cleaner and slightly less broke. I stared at the ceiling and saw the shelter dorm instead. Fluorescent lights buzzing, women snoring, the smell of too many lives crammed into one space. If this is charity, I thought, then it's more than I've been offered in a long time. But Damon's voice kept hissing from the corners. This won't last. You'll be thrown out again. Better to jump before you're pushed. By dawn, I had made a decision. I would tell Marcus at breakfast that I was grateful, but I couldn't accept. I would find some halfway decent room to rent, get a job handing out flyers or stocking shelves, and try to build a life that didn't depend on anyone's generosity. It sounded noble at 5 a.m. It sounded stupid by 8. In the dining room, sunlight streamed through tall windows, turning the silverware into little blades of light. Charlotte sat at the table in a pale blue dress, hair brushed, feet swinging. When she saw me, her face lit up. Gretchen, she said, you slept here. I was afraid it was a dream. Not a dream, I said, taking a seat next to her. I'm very real. My knees confirm it every time I stand up. She giggled, leaning against me. The smell of pancakes and coffee filled the room. A maid poured orange juice into crystal glasses. If I'd had any sense, I would have kept my mouth shut. But sense and I have been on rocky terms for years. Marcus, I began, as he walked in with a folder in his hand, I wanted to talk to you about your offer. So do I, he said, sitting down. Eat first. It's easier to process treasonous information on a full stomach. Treasonous, I repeated. He slid the folder onto the table, flipping it open. Papers, photographs, printed emails. My security team has been busy, he said. The men who took Charlotte weren't freelancers. They're connected to a larger group that's been trying to get access to classified projects my company is involved in. Charlotte looked between us, eyes wide. Are we talking about the bad guys? She whispered. Yes, he said softly, but the grown-up version, the kind who wear suits while they break things. He pushed a photo toward me. It was grainy, taken from a distance, but clear enough. Me and Charlotte leaving the convenience store, my jacket wrapped around her. They've been tracking everything, he said. News, street cameras, anything they can hack. They know Charlotte escaped. They know she spent time with you. As far as they're concerned, you are now part of the equation. My stomach dropped. The pancakes on my plate turned to cardboard. You're saying if I go back to my normal life, I said, they might come after me to get to you or her. Yes, he said. I'm saying staying at a shelter or in some cheap apartment with a paper-thin lock would be the worst possible decision. You'd be vulnerable, and they'd assume you know more than you do. I snorted. Joke on them. I barely remember my own passwords. He didn't smile. This isn't just about generosity, he went on. It's about security. For you, for us. Keeping you here under our protection with resources and guards and systems you don't even see. That's the smartest move. So your job offer, I said slowly, is also witness protection light. Something like that, he admitted, except with better bedding. I looked at Charlotte. She was watching me with open fear. You're not going back to that place, are you? She asked. The one with all the beds in one room. I cleared my throat. That was the plan, I said. But apparently international crime has added me to their address book. She reached for my hand, squeezing hard. Stay, she said, please. Before I could answer, Elizabeth appeared in the doorway. Mr. Wellington, she said, I'm sorry to interrupt breakfast, but there are 2 men at the gate. Marcus's eyes narrowed. What men? One identifies himself as Damon Cole, she said. The other as Robert Cole. My fork clattered against the plate. Of course he brought our son. When guilt doesn't work, bring reinforcements. We watched from the security room again, like a couple sitting through a bad reality show they'd accidentally become part of. Damon stood at the gate, attempting his best concerned ex-husband face. Beside him, Robert shifted from foot to foot, wearing a suit that probably fit better when he bought it. His expression was irritated, not worried. Let them speak from outside, Marcus said. No one opens that gate without my say. A few minutes later, I was back at the iron bars, 2 guards at my back. Damon looked the same tired mess he'd been yesterday. Robert looked older than the last time I'd seen him, but not in a way that made me feel closer to him. Mom, he said, as if I'd been on vacation, not in hell. What is going on? Short version, I said. I helped save a kidnapped child, accidentally joined a national security incident, and now your father is trying to mooch off a billionaire through me. Robert's face tightened. Dad told me you've fallen in with some rich guy, he said. That you're letting him control you. He said you refused to help when you knew Dad was struggling. I stared at Damon. That's the story you told him. Damon held up his hands like a martyr. I told him the truth, that you sold the shop, the house, and then ran off to live in a mansion while I'm dealing with the fallout. The fallout of your own choices, I said. Robert stepped closer to the bars. You can't just abandon your family, Mom, he said. You raised me to believe that. Dad's sick. He needs help. You're out here playing Cinderella or something. The hypocrisy made my head spin. Where were you when I was homeless, Robert? I asked quietly. He blinked. What are you talking about? The shelter, I said. The nights on a cot with a plastic mattress, the paper that said no fixed address, the storm in the park. Where were you when I was counting out $7.34 to buy a sandwich? He opened his mouth, then shut it. Dad said you exaggerated, he muttered. That you were staying with friends, that you were being dramatic. Dramatic, of course. Let me be very clear, I said. I slept in a homeless shelter. I ate donated food. I kept my pills in a plastic bag under my pillow so they wouldn't be stolen. When I called you, you told me I was guilt-tripping you, that you had a big project at work. Color drained from his face. That's not, I did. He looked at Damon, confused. You said. I said what I had to, Damon snapped. I wasn't going to drag our family's dirty laundry all over. She always makes it sound worse. You know how your mother is. Before I could unleash what was rapidly building in my chest, Marcus appeared at my side, calm as ever. He held a slim folder. Mr. Cole, he said, nodding to each. Glad you're both here, saves me time. Damon bristled. This is between me and my wife. Ex-wife, Marcus corrected, and any matter involving her safety is my concern. Robert frowned. Her safety. Marcus opened the folder. Let's settle a few things, he said. First, the legal status. The divorce between Damon and Gretchen Cole was finalized 3 months ago. I have copies of the decree. There is no joint property, no shared accounts, no legal basis for Mr. Cole to make claims on her finances or living arrangements. He handed a photocopy through the bars. Robert took it with numb fingers, scanning the page. Damon's face tightened. Second, Marcus continued, Mr. Cole's current situation. He is, as of last week, 3 months behind on rent. Eviction papers have been filed. His bank accounts show a series of large withdrawals coinciding with the period he was involved with a woman named Sarah. That's private, Damon snapped. Not when you show up at my gate attempting to leverage a woman under my protection, Marcus said coolly. Sarah, according to our investigation, has a record of targeting vulnerable men with access to money. She cleaned you out and moved on. I'm sorry you were an easy mark. That does not make Gretchen your solution. Robert turned slowly to look at his father. You told me the divorce wasn't finalized, he said quietly. You said you were working things out. You said she abandoned you. Damon's mouth opened and closed. I didn't want you to think badly of her, he said lamely. I'm managing that all by myself, I said. Don't worry. Marcus stepped slightly in front of me now, not hiding me, but making his stance very clear. Here, what's not going to happen, he said. You are not going to harass Ms. Cole. You are not going to show up at her place of residence. You are not going to contact her employer or attempt to interfere with her work. Employer, Robert echoed. Yes, Marcus said. I have offered Ms. Cole a position here, a formal role, generous salary, full protection. She is not a guest housewife. She is under contract and under my protection. That's ridiculous, Damon scoffed. What, you hearing her as your pet? Marcus's gaze sharpened. Choose your next words very carefully, Mr. Cole. Damon's bravado faltered. He looked at the guards, at the cameras, at the house behind us, at the money behind all of it. It won't last, he muttered, but there was less heat in it now. Old women don't get fairy tale endings. I'm not interested in fairy tale-ies, I said. I'm interested in not dying on a cot because the men in my life used me up and walked away. Robert looked stricken. Mom, I didn't know, he said. I swear, I asked and he told me you were fine. I know, I said. You wanted to believe the easier version, so did I for a long time. He stepped closer to the bars. Let me help, he said. I can get you a place near us. You don't have to stay here. This is crazy. There are men with guns. This guy is involved with, what, government secrets. It's dangerous. Marcus answered before I could. Exactly, he said. Which is why letting her wander back into the world as an unprotected, easily targeted connection would be unforgivably stupid. The people who took your half-sister are not done. They've seen Gretchen with Charlotte. They know her face. Walking away from this estate would not make her safer. It would make her bait. Robert swallowed hard. Half-sister, he repeated, eyes widening as he processed that. That's a conversation for another time, I cut in. The point is, my life is not a lifeboat you can hop onto whenever your ship springs a leak. Marcus turned back to Damon. If you harass her again, he said quietly, I will make it my personal project to ensure every landlord within 100 miles knows your history. I will also explore every legal avenue available to keep you at a distance. You have used her enough. That ends now. He paused, then added, Gretchen is family here. Treat her as such in your mind because that's how we will respond. The word family did something odd in my chest. It landed in some empty space I hadn't realized was still looking for a home. Damon looked from Marcus to me, realizing, finally, that whatever control he thought he had was gone. Fine, he said. Stay here, pretend you belong. When it all falls apart, don't come looking for me. I won't, I said. Robert hesitated. Mom, can I call you? Later, without him. He gestured at Damon with his chin. I'll think about it, I said. I wasn't ready to grant absolution in the same breath I just learned how little he'd known or cared when I was at my worst. They left. The gate closed with a finality that felt less like exile and more like a boundary, for once. Back in the study, Marcus closed the door behind us. I'm sorry you had to go through that, he said. I've gone through worse, I replied, but thank you. He sat down heavily, fatigue settling over him like dust. My offer stands, he said. Not because I feel sorry for you, not because Charlotte has latched onto you like a koala and refuses to let go, not even because my security advisor thinks it's the safest option, though he does. He looked at me steadily. I'm offering because you belong here more than most people I've ever met, not because of what you have, but because of what you did when you had nothing. I thought about the shelter, the plastic mattress, the sound of women crying in the dark. I thought about the alley, the storm, the way Charlotte's small hand had felt in mine. I thought about Damon's face at the gate, stretched with desperation. About Robert's disbelief when dramatic turned into documented. And I thought about Charlotte in the gazebo, looking up at me and asking if I was her guardian angel. 200,000 a year, I said slowly, plus the bonus, plus a room that has a door that locks and a bed that doesn't squeak when I breathe. Yes, he said, with the understanding that if I see something happening to that child I think is wrong, I get to say it, I added, up to and including telling you you're being an idiot. His mouth curved. I sincerely hope you will, he said. I have a board full of people who tell me what I want to hear. It's not helpful. And this isn't charity, I said. I work, I earn it. Correct, he said. This is a job with emotional hazard pay. I took a breath, the kind you take before you sign something, or jump, or walk away. Except this time, for once, I wasn't walking away. Yes, I said, I'll take the job. He exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders. Good, he said. Welcome to the madhouse, Miss Cole. Later, when I went to find Charlotte, she was in the garden, sitting cross-legged on the grass, braiding flowers into a crooked chain. You're frowning, she said when she saw me. Did the bad men come back? Different bad men, I said, but they're gone now. She held up the flower chain. I made this for you, she said, so you don't forget you're my angel. I sat beside her, my old bones protesting, and let her place it on my head like a lopsided crown. I signed something today, I told her. It means I get to stay, for a while, be your companion, irrational questions answerer, cookie sharer, storm finder. Her face lit up so brightly, it made the whole estate look cheap by comparison. Good, she said, because I already put you in all my plans. For the first time in a long time, my life wasn't being dragged somewhere. I was walking into it on my own feet. I had chosen a new family. And miracle of miracles, they had chosen me back. 2 years later, I'm sitting in a garden that looks like it was bullied into perfection by very expensive gardeners, drinking tea out of china so thin I'm afraid to breathe on it. Across the lawn, Charlotte is chasing butterflies. She's 10 now, all long legs and wild hair, and that particular kind of confidence kids have when they know deep down, that the adults in their life will show up. She's wearing a white sundress splattered with grass stains, a crown of crooked daisies, and rain boots with unicorns on them, because apparently personal style is just chaos with conviction. "Grandma, look," she calls, cupping her hands gently around what I hope is not a bee. She's been calling me Grandma for a while now, sometimes Gretch Grandma, sometimes Gretchen Mom if she's trying to get away with something. The first time she did it in front of her friends, I almost choked on my tea. I set my cup down carefully as she runs back, opening her hands to show a butterfly that has absolutely no idea it's become a metaphor. It sits there, orange and black, wings twitching. "See," she whispers, "if you're gentle, they don't fly away." I look at her, at this child who once hid behind trash cans in a storm, and think, some of us learned that the hard way. "Careful," I say. "You don't want to squeeze too tight and hurt it." She nods, the solemn gravity of a 10-year-old who understands the weight of things now, and releases it. The butterfly flutters off toward the rose bushes, probably to file a complaint. Our tea tray sits on the small garden table between us. Scones, small sandwiches, strawberries arranged like someone went to culinary art school. Afternoon tea used to be a luxury I saw in magazines. Now it's just Tuesday. 2 years ago, I was counting coins in a shelter. Now I am, according to Marcus's very official email, head of family operations. The first time I read that subject line, I thought he'd sent it to the wrong person. The title came 6 months after I started. We were in his study, the same room where he'd offered me a job that sounded like a typo. "You're already doing it," he'd said, sliding the new contract across the desk. "You coordinate Charlotte's schedule, manage the staff around her, keep track of tutors, medical appointments, writing lessons. You're also the one who reminds me to eat when board meetings run long and to actually go to my own checkups." "I nag," I said, professionally. "You manage our lives," he'd corrected. "You're the person everything moves around." The salary line had made me sit back so fast the chair squeaked. $300,000, I'd blurted, annually. "Yes," he'd said calmly, "you're underpaid." Underpaid? After 3 decades of watching men buy rusty lamps for more than I made in a day, that word did things to my blood pressure medication. I had read the contract twice and then looked up at him. "You realize I used to handwrite price tags on porcelain figurines, right? And now you handwrite color-coded weekly plans that keep my daughter stable and my company's chaos out of her orbit," he said. "Value is contextual. So now, apparently, I am head of family operations, which means my day starts earlier than anyone else's and ends last, but somehow I don't resent it, because for once, all this effort isn't being siphoned into somebody else's ego. Mornings, I'm up before the kitchens are fully roaring, in the garden with my first cup of tea, while the dew still clings to the grass. Charlotte usually wanders out in pajamas and a robe, hair exploding in every direction, clutching a book or stuffed horse. 5 minutes before we start the machine, I tell her. The machine is our routine. Breakfast, then schoolwork with the tutor in the library 3 days a week. Piano lessons twice a week. Riding lessons at the stables, where Thunder, yes, he's real, and yes, he's huge, snorts like an offended dragon every time I walk by. Therapy sessions every other Thursday with Dr. Chen, who has the patience of a saint and the spine of titanium. Somewhere in the background of all this, Marcus's world whirs at its own terrifying speed. Board members flying in and out, security briefings, government calls. Sometimes I see it only in glimpses, the way his shoulders tighten after certain meetings, the way Agent Richards appears unannounced with a face that says, "We need to talk. Now." In those moments, I've become the human buffer. For Charlotte, that means being the person she can collapse on when the nightmares come back, or when a loud noise sounds too much like a storm. For Marcus, it's quieter, leaving a plate of food on his desk when he forgets to eat, walking into the study at midnight with tea when the light is still on, saying, "That's enough news for tonight. Turn it off. Go check on your daughter instead." I joke that I'm the house's emotional plumber. I keep things flowing so the pipes don't burst. Remember when you were just my guardian angel? Charlotte asks now, pouring more tea with the reckless confidence of someone who's never paid a porcelain replacement bill. I remember when you were hiding behind garbage cans, I say. We've both upgraded. You've upgraded the most, she says. You're basically the boss of the house. Dad said so. Your father exaggerates, I say, though he really did tell a group of board members at a dinner party. This is Gretchen, the person who keeps our family functioning. Ignore her at your own risk. He's also introduced me to people as Charlotte's second mother more than once. The first time, my eyes burned so badly I had to excuse myself to check on dessert, which was a lie, because dessert was perfect, and I was the one falling apart. I have a key to every important door in the house now, not because I asked, but because one day Elizabeth pressed the ring into my hand and said, "You already act like you live here. Might as well make it official." "You're not jealous?" I'd asked her. She'd given me a look. "I run the house," she said. "You run the heart of it. They're different jobs." Now, in the garden, she appears at the edge of the patio, moving with the same calm efficiency as always, carrying a silver tray. On the tray is a neat stack of envelopes and a small leather-bound folder. One envelope has my name on it in a font that screams bill or lawsuit to my nervous system. "Ms. Cole," she says, "these were delivered by courier, marked urgent." Something cold slips its fingers around my spine. For a long time, life trained me to believe that envelopes like these meant eviction notices, medical bills, lawsuits, or some new creative way the universe had found to strip me of stability. The garden suddenly feels less solid under my chair. "Do I need a lawyer for whatever that is?" I ask, forcing a joke. "It might help to have a father," Elizabeth says, glancing toward the house. "Mr. Wellington asked if you and Miss Charlotte would join him in the study." "Study time," Charlotte groans, "but it's tea time." "This is a different sort of study," Elizabeth says, lips twitching. "Bring your tea if you like." We follow her through the hallways, past paintings and polished tables that no longer intimidate me as much as they used to. Charlotte hooks her arm through mine, swinging our joined hands between us. In the study, Marcus is standing by the desk, jacket off, tie loose. The leather folder lies open in front of him, along with a couple of very official-looking documents with too many signatures already on them. "Hey," he says, giving us both a small smile. "Come in." "Did we do something?" Charlotte asks immediately. "Because if this is about the cookie jar, Grandma ate more than I did." "Traitor," I mutter. Marcus huffs a soft laugh. "No one is in trouble," he says. "At least not for cookies. These are good papers." Good papers. That's a new category for me. He gestures to the chairs in front of the desk. We sit. My fingers curl around the edge of the cushion. "I should probably start with a question," he says, looking at me. "How much do you know about adult adoption?" "I know you usually adopt children," I say slowly. "Not people who get AARP mailers." He nods. "True, but there are legal provisions for adults to be adopted in certain ways. It's often used for inheritance issues or to formalize relationships that are already functionally parental." He slides one of the documents toward me. My name is there in print, next to words I never expected to see near it. Proposed adoptee. My heart stutters. "This was Charlotte's idea," he says. Charlotte bounces slightly in her chair. "Tell her," she urges. He nods to her. "Go ahead." Charlotte turns to me, suddenly shy for the first time in a while. "So," she says, twisting her fingers together, "we were talking in therapy, about families. Dr. Chen was saying how sometimes you have the family you're born with and sometimes you have the family you find." She takes a breath. "I told her I have both. I have Dad, and I have you." My throat tightens. "I told her I wanted you to be my real grandma," she goes on. "Not just like pretend, so no one could ever say you weren't. And so when I have kids someday," she makes a gagging face, "way later, they'll know you're really their grandma too." She taps the paper. "Dr. Chen said sometimes people can make it legal. Dad said we could talk to lawyers. I told him I wanted it. So, she swallows. Will you let me adopt you, as my grandma, for real? For a second, all I can hear is blood rushing in my ears. 2 years ago, I was writing, "No fixed address," on a form in a shelter. Now a child sitting in a leather chair in a billionaire's study is asking to legally claim me as her grandmother. I look at the document again, at my name, at the lines that, if I sign, would make something official that my heart has already done without paperwork. My voice cracks. I clear my throat. I didn't know grandparenthood worked this way. It can, Marcus says quietly, in ways that matter. It gives you certain protections and privileges within our family. In the eyes of the law, you wouldn't be just an employee. Not that you ever were, as far as we're concerned. I let out a weak laugh. My last promotion came with a nameplate and a $25 gift card. This is a bit of a jump. He smiles, then his expression sobers. There's one more piece, he says gently. Another document. He slides the leather folder closer and pulls out a second set of papers. This, he says, is my will. My pulse spikes. Marcus. I'm not dying, he says quickly. My last physical was boring in all the right ways, but after what happened with Charlotte, I'd be a fool not to update every contingency plan I have. He taps the will. I'm revising guardianship, he says. If anything happens to me before Charlotte is an adult, I want it in writing that she stays here, in this home, with this life, and that you are her legal guardian. The air goes thin. What about other family? I ask. Cousins, uncles, people with shared DNA. I have relatives, he says. Some of them even like me, but none of them slept in a gazebo with my daughter during a storm and used their last $20 to buy her socks and cookies. Blood is not a guarantee of loyalty. You are. He slides the guardianship clause across the desk. My name is there again, this time next to the words, legal guardian. Charlotte's hand finds mine, gripping tight. Please say yes, she whispers. I mean, I know you're not going anywhere, but this makes it forever. Forever. It's a word I used to hear in wedding vows and lifetime warranties. Both of those turned out to be flexible concepts. Now, staring at these documents, forever looks like something else entirely. Not a trap, not a sentence, an anchor. I went from a shelter cot to this, I say softly. Do you have any idea how insane that feels? Yes, Marcus says, because I went from not knowing if my daughter was alive to watching her run around the garden with a woman she calls grandma. Life can be insane in good directions, too. I look at Charlotte, at her hopeful face, at the tiny scar near her temple only I notice when she's tired, at the way she leans toward me like my answer is the difference between gravity working and everything floating away. The truth is, paperwork or not, I've been this child's grandmother for a while. I've been the one she runs to after a bad dream. The one she calls from writing lessons when Thunder decides to be a drama queen. The one she comes to with whispered crush confessions and questions about why people can be cruel and kind in the same skin. Family, I'm realizing, is just love with a good lawyer. Yes, I hear myself say, voice shaking. Yes, I'll sign to being your grandma, to guardianship if we ever need it. God willing, we never will. Charlotte launches herself at me, so fast my chair nearly tips. Good, she says into my neck, arms wrapped tight. Because I already told everyone at school you're my real grandma, now I won't be lying. Marcus slides a pen across the desk, eyes suspiciously bright. Then let's make it official, he says. My hand trembles a little as I sign, but the line of my name is steady enough. 2 years ago, I thought my life had ended in a shelter. Turns out, it was just the ugly, necessary prologue to the chapter where I finally got a family that chose me on purpose. If you've never had a tiny, private adoption celebration thrown for you in a billionaire's garden, let me tell you, it's wildly unnecessary and absolutely perfect. A week after the papers were signed and stamped and blessed by enough legal authorities to make my head spin, the back garden was transformed. Not into some over-the-top circus. That's not Marcus's style. It was elegant, String lights woven through the trees like fallen stars. Small round tables with white tablecloths and simple centerpieces. Jars of wildflowers Charlotte had insisted on arranging herself. A cake on a stand that looked too pretty to cut, with delicate white frosting and the words, "Welcome, Grandma Gretchen," in careful script. I almost cried just seeing my name spelled right. Guests filtered in as the sun slid down. Agent Richards in a suit that actually fit, looking slightly uncomfortable without his usual earpiece. A couple of his security team, hovering near the edges like shadows. Elizabeth, of course, moving between guests with the ease of someone directing an orchestra. Charlotte's tutor, her writing instructor, one of her school friends, and her mother. A few of Marcus's closest work people, the ones who know the family exists as more than leverage. No one asked what I was doing there. No one looked at me like staff. When I went to pick up a tray to help, Elizabeth gently took it out of my hand. "Tonight," she said, "you sit." That's how I ended up at the main table, between Charlotte and Marcus, with a view of everything. The lights, the laughter, the way glasses caught the glow. When people toasted, they toasted us. "To new beginnings," said Agent Richards, raising his glass, "and to people who show up when it counts." "To the woman who tells me when I'm being an idiot," said one of Marcus's board members, making everyone laugh. "And to the only person in this house I'm actually afraid of disappointing." I laughed too, but there was a tightness in my chest that felt suspiciously like joy pressed up against old scar tissue. At some point, Charlotte stood on her chair and tapped her spoon against her glass. The sound rang out across the tables. "Excuse me," she announced, in the confidently loud voice of a girl who has never been told to be smaller. "I have a speech." "Oh boy," Marcus muttered, wiping his mouth with his napkin. "Brace yourselves." She shot him a look, then straightened her shoulders and turned to face the small group of people who, apparently, now constituted my circle. "So," she began, hi, you all know me, I'm Charlotte, obviously." She rolled her eyes at herself, which made a few people chuckle. "And this," she said, pointing at me, "is my grandma. My real grandma now, because of papers and lawyers and all that boring stuff." A ripple of laughter moved through the garden. "When I got lost," she continued, voice softening, "I thought my life was over. I thought I'd never see Daddy again. I thought the bad guys had won." She paused, glancing at Marcus, who gave her a little nod. "Then I started hearing this sound in the storm," she said. "It was a voice, her voice." She pointed at me again. "She found me behind trash cans. She gave me her coat. She bought me socks and cookies with her last money. She stayed with me even though she didn't know me. She could have just walked away, but she didn't." Her eyes were shining now, mine too. "And people say she saved me," she went on. "Which is true." She took a breath. "But I think we saved each other because she didn't have a home either, not really, and now she does with us." The garden went quiet. Even the cicadas seemed to pause. "So this party is to celebrate that," she said, voice trembling just a little. "That I have a grandma now. That my dad has someone who makes him eat and sleep and not work himself into a zombie. That our house has someone who yells at the TV during the news with me. That we're a weird little family, but we're ours." She lifted her glass of sparkling cider. "To Grandma Gretchen," she said, "who found me when I was lost, and who I think was a little lost too." I lost it. Not in the dramatic fainting way, but in the quiet, shaking, nose-running way that is much less glamorous. I pressed my napkin to my face as everyone echoed, "To Grandma Gretchen," and took sips. People came up after, squeezing my hand, hugging me, telling little stories about things I'd done in the last 2 years that I barely remembered. A late-night conversation with the writing instructor when Charlotte hit a plateau. A suggestion to the tutor that math problems be written with horses instead of trains. A quiet word to Agent Richards about making sure certain security briefings took place away from Charlotte's bedroom. They remembered. They noticed. Apparently, while I've been busy stitching the edges of this family together, they've been watching. At one point, while cutting the cake, a memory slapped me sideways. The shelter cafeteria, fluorescent lights, trays of beige food. The storm beating against the windows the night I found Charlotte. The sticky floor of the convenience store. The way my hand had shaken when I handed over that last crumpled bill. Now my hand was steady as I passed slices of cake to people who said, "Thank you, Grandma," like it was the most normal thing in the world. Life is rude like that. It doesn't warn you when it's about to flip the script. By the time the sun had fully set and the string lights were doing most of the work, guests began drifting out. Agent Richards was one of the last. He shook my hand, then pulled me into a brief, slightly awkward hug. "You know," he said, "in my line of work, happy endings are rare. Try not to mess this one up, okay?" "No pressure," I said, sniffling. Eventually, Charlotte was half asleep in Marcus's lap, frosting on her cheek. Elizabeth whisked her off to bed with the efficiency of a general leading a campaign. That left Marcus and me in the garden, under the soft glow of the lights, with the remains of the party around us and a bottle of something expensive open on the table. He poured 2 fingers into a glass and slid it toward me. "You've earned it," he said. "I earned the cake," I said, taking a sip. "This tastes like it costs more than my old car." "It probably did," he admitted. For a while, we just sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night. Crickets, a distant neigh from the stables, the soft murmur of staff cleaning up. "Do you ever wonder," he said finally, "what would have happened if you hadn't found her?" I watched a moth throw itself at one of the bulbs, over and over. "If I hadn't followed the crying in that alley," I asked, "I'd probably still be in the shelter, or dead in a hospital from a stroke nobody noticed in time." He winced. "Don't say that." "That's the direction things were headed," I said. "As for Charlotte, maybe she would have found someone else. Maybe she wouldn't. Maybe the men would have grabbed her before she got far enough. Maybe you'd be sitting in a very different garden with a stone where the fountain is." He took a long breath, then let it out slowly. "Sometimes I think about that timeline," he said quietly. "The one where I never see her again. It's like a ghost life hovering just out of reach." We both sat with that for a moment. "You know why I did all this, right?" he asked. "Because your lawyers told you to," I said lightly. He gave me a look. "You know what I mean," he said. I shrugged. "Because Charlotte needed stability," I said. "Because I was there and apparently good at making instant coffee drinkable and kids less terrified." He swirled the liquid in his glass, watching it catch the light. "Partly," he said, "but there's more." He turned to me, expression open in a way I didn't see often outside of conversations about Charlotte. "I watched your divorce records," he said. "Your bank statements, the dates of business sales and hospital bills. 42 years married to a man who let you sell your life out from under you and then shoved you out the door for someone younger." "Late 30s is that young," I muttered, "because Petty has no age limit." His mouth twitched. "No one loved you properly," he said. "Not in the way you deserved. They loved what you did for them, loved the stability you provided, but they didn't see you." I looked away. The truth of it stung. "You gave everything," he went on softly, "to your husband, to your son, to your business. And when the storm came, literally and metaphorically, they let you stand in it alone. And yet, when you had nothing left to lose, you gave everything again, to my daughter." He set his glass down. "I could have written you a check," he said, "paid off your debts, set you up in a nice little condo somewhere and called it even. But that would have been transactional. It wouldn't have honored what you actually did." "What did I actually do?" I asked, voice rough. "You stepped into the role no one had ever stepped into for you," he said. "You loved a child who wasn't yours like she was, without calculating, without asking what you'd get in return. And you did it at the lowest point of your life." He smiled just a little. "So I gave you what I could. A salary, yes. A job title, yes. But more importantly, a place. A role that matches what you were already doing. A family that sees you. A last name on papers that say, officially, you're not disposable." My eyes burned hot again. Apparently, my tear ducts had filed for overtime. "I didn't do it because I'm generous," he said. "I did it because you earned it, because Charlotte needs you, and because, if I'm honest, I think you need us too." I stared at my hands in my lap, at the way they no longer shook when I reached for things. At the faint indent from the ring I no longer wore, at the small smudge of frosting on my knuckle from where Charlotte had grabbed my hand during her speech. "I do," I said quietly. "Need you, both of you. I'd never say that to your face if I wasn't emotionally compromised by cake and paperwork, but yes, I need you." His shoulders loosened, some tension I hadn't even noticed easing. "Good," he said, "because we're not letting you go." Employer and employee is a line that matters, legally. On paper, I still have a job. I still have a title and a salary and performance evaluations that mostly consist of stop doing so much for everyone else and take a day off. But sitting there in the dim light, with the echo of Charlotte's, we saved each other, still in the air, it felt like something else. Chosen family, I've learned, is just a group of people who look at each other's damage and decide to stay anyway. For the first time in my 67 years, I wasn't just being tolerated or used. I was being valued, seen, loved. And honestly, that's worth more than the fountain. The thing about life finally settling down is that it makes you very suspicious. Every time a phone rings at a strange hour, every time security gets a little tighter for no obvious reason, my brain still goes, here we go again. So when Elizabeth found me in the small sitting room one afternoon and said, "There's someone at the gate asking for you," my stomach dropped. "Which someone?" I asked. "The dangerous kind or the annoying kind?" She hesitated. "Your son," she said softly, "Robert." I hadn't seen him since that day at the gate, when Marcus had laid his life out in cold, hard facts, and my son had looked at me like he was meeting a stranger. For a second, the urge to say, "Tell him I'm not home," was loud enough to rattle my teeth. But some part of me, the same idiotic muscle that spent 20 years hopping Damon would become a decent person, insisted I at least hear him out. "Tell them to keep him outside the gate," I said. "I'll come." The walk down the long driveway felt a lot shorter this time, maybe because I wasn't the one begging to be let in. Robert stood on the other side of the iron bars, hands shoved deep in the pockets of a simple jacket. No suit, no tie. He'd lost weight, not the gym kind, the stress kind. Lines bracketed his mouth that hadn't been there before. He watched me approach, his posture small in a way I'd never seen. "Hi, Mom," he said, voice tentative. "Robert," I replied, "you look like you've been sleeping next to your inbox." He huffed a breath that might have been a laugh, something like that. We stood there in the weird, echoing quiet that lives in spaces, where too many things have been left unsaid for too long. "So," I said finally, because someone had to what do I owe the pleasure?" He winced. "I deserved that," he said, "probably worse." I lifted an eyebrow. "I won't argue." He exhaled. "I was wrong," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "About basically everything. About you, about Dad, about the divorce, about all of it." I watched him, saying nothing. "After that day," he went on, "I confronted him, about the papers, about the shelter, about the money." He swallowed. "He lied again, tried to spin it, said the rich guy had you brainwashed, said you were playing victim." I could practically hear Damon using those exact phrases. He had a limited vocabulary when it came to avoiding responsibility. "Then he asked me for money," Robert continued. "He said he needed help getting back on his feet. He said if I really cared about family, I'd step up." "And did you?" I asked quietly. "At first," he admitted. "I helped with rent, groceries. I told myself I was doing what you would have done, being the bigger person, but it never ended. There was always one more bill, one more emergency, and every time I said I couldn't, he guilted me, the way he used to guilt you." He looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed. "I started hearing my own words to you in his mouth. 'You're being dramatic, you're guilt-tripping me.' It made me sick." "Good, I didn't say it out loud. I'm growing." "Then I found this," he said, reaching into his bag. He pulled out a small frame, silver, familiar. Inside was a photo, me in my 30s, hair darker and bigger, laughing with my arm around a very young Robert who was missing his front teeth. We were standing in front of the antique shop the week it opened, the grand opening banner crooked behind us. Damon, in the background, was half turned away, already distracted. "I found it in a box in the garage," Robert said. "I realized I don't remember you as the woman Dad described, the one who played victim. I remember this you, the one who worked all day and still helped me with school projects at night, the one who came to every game, the one who made a cake, even when we didn't have much." He looked up, voice cracking. "And when you needed me, I believed him instead of you. I'm so sorry, Mom." For a long moment, I just stared at the picture, at my younger face, unlined but already tired, at the joy that was still there anyway. I remembered that day, the smell of fresh paint and coffee, the bell on the door ringing for the first time, the way Robert had helped blow up balloons until he got dizzy, the way Damon had spent most of the day outside, smoking and complaining about the noise. I remembered thinking, this is the beginning of something good. I'd been half right. When I looked back up, Robert's eyes were wet. He wasn't hiding it. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I don't expect you to let me in. I just needed you to know that I see it now, what he did, what I did, and I'm trying to be better than him." The old me would have rushed to say, "It's okay," even when it was. The new me has better boundaries and more practice sitting with discomfort. "It hurt," I said simply. "Hearing my own son call me dramatic when I was telling him I was homeless, knowing you believed your father's polished version instead of my cracked one." He flinched. "I know," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." "But," I added, "I also remember this." I tapped the frame. The boy who thought I hung the moon because I remembered his favorite cereal. The kid who hid behind my legs at the doctor's office. The teenager who, once upon a time, still hugged me in public. A ghost of a smile tugged at his mouth. "I don't know if I can just flip a switch and say all is forgiven," I went on. "Forgiveness is more like physical therapy, slow, annoying. Sometimes it hurts worse before it gets better." He nodded quickly. "I'll take slow," he said. "Slow is more than I deserve." "But I appreciate you coming," I said, "and saying this and bringing this." I lifted the frame slightly. "This is a good memory. I don't have to throw it out just because of what came later." His shoulders sagged with relief. "Does that mean I can call, sometimes, not about Dad or money, just to say hi?" "We can start there," I said. "Calls, maybe a visit, here if security doesn't object. No surprises. No showing up with Damon in tow like a Trojan horse." He nodded fervently. "Never again," he said. "He doesn't even know I'm here. I had to step back for my own sanity." "Good," I said. "You're allowed to protect yourself. Took me 6 decades to learn that. You can cut the line early." We said goodbye with an awkward half-hug through the bars that probably looked ridiculous on camera. As he walked away, he looked back once, raising a hand. I raised mine too. It wasn't a Hallmark moment, but it was something. A crack in the wall, a draft of possibility. Later, I sat in the garden with the framed photo on my lap. The light was soft, the kind that makes everything look kinder. Charlotte found me there, because of course she did. That child has a sixth sense for emotional weather. "Whatcha looking at?" she asked, plopping down beside me. I turned the frame toward her. "Your uncle," I said, "and a version of me that could still eat cake at 10 p.m. without paying for it the next day." She studied the photo. "You look happy," she said. "I was," I replied, "that day." "Did he say sorry?" she asked. "The kid never wastes time." "He did," I said, "properly, no excuses." "Do you forgive him?" she asked. "Forgiveness is complicated," I said. "Part of me wants to. Part of me wants to staple a list of his past comments to his shirt and make him read them once a week." She snorted. "Dad says forgiveness doesn't mean you let someone hurt you again," she said. "He says it just means you stop letting their bad choices live rent-free in your head." "Your dad is getting very quotable in his old age," I said. She shrugged. "He reads a lot of therapy books." We sat there for a moment, watching a gardener argue with a rose bush. "I think," I said slowly, "I can forgive him, eventually, not in a we pretend nothing happened way, More like I put down the heavy bag I've been carrying with his name on it. I don't hand it back to him. I just stop breaking my back with it. That sounds smart, she said. Also, your metaphors are getting better. I've had a good tutor, I said, nudging her shoulder. That night, when the house was quiet and my bones were tired in that satisfying way that comes from a day well lived, I found myself in front of the camera again. Not a professional camera, just the little one on my laptop glowing at me like a small, all-seeing eye. Marcus had insisted I get comfortable with it when Charlotte begged for us to record our story for later. So here I am, talking to you. Yes, you, the one scrolling at 2 in the morning, probably eating something you'll regret and wondering how on earth you ended up watching a 67-year-old woman talk about guardian angels and divorce papers. I started this story by telling you that love can be the most expensive mistake you ever make. That selling your house and your business to save a man who walks away anyway feels like the cruelest joke the universe can play. And if the story had ended with a shelter cot and a storm, that would have been true. But here's the thing I didn't know in that alley, standing there soaked and tired, listening to a child cry in the dark. Sometimes the moment you think is your final act of kindness is actually your own rescue mission. I thought I was spending my last $20 on a stranger's daughter. I thought, in a grim, resigned way, this is it, my last good deed. After this, I have nothing left to give. What I didn't know was that I was buying a ticket out of the life that had been killing me slowly for years. That following the sound of a child's fear would lead me to a home, a job, a family, and a granddaughter who would one day stand on a chair and declare to a garden full of people that we saved each other. If that's not cosmic irony, I don't know what is. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about letting Damon back into my life or pretending Robert never hurt me. It's about setting down the weight of their choices so my hands are free to hold better things. It's about looking at this house, this garden, this odd little family I've stitched myself into, and choosing not to let old ghosts live in the guest room. So, let me turn this around and make you uncomfortable for a second. What would you have done? If you were soaked, cold, broke, walking back to a shelter, and heard a child crying in a storm, would you have followed the sound? Spent your last money, risked getting dragged into something dangerous? And if you have done something like that, some quiet act of kindness that cost you more than anyone knows, did it change anything? Did it change you? Tell me, tell us. The comment section exists for more than arguing with strangers about nothing. This might be the end of this story, but it's not the end of mine. I'm 67 now. I live in a house with too many stairs, with a granddaughter who insists on teaching me TikTok dances, and a man who introduces me as family at events where everyone else is wearing suits that cost more than my first car. I have legal papers that say I belong here, a job that pays me what my care is worth, a son who is trying, slowly, to become the kind of man he wasn't raised by. And I have you, apparently, listening to me ramble on about second chances. Sometimes guardian angels don't fall from the sky. Sometimes they crawl out of shelters and convenience stores, soaking wet and grumpy, and stumble into the right alley at the right time. Sometimes, without meaning to, they save themselves too. The last shot you see if this were a movie is simple. I'm standing in the wide front doorway of the house that is now my home. The evening light spills across the polished floor. Outside, Charlotte is running across the lawn, hair flying, shouting something about showing Thunder her new art project. Marcus is a few steps behind, hands in his pockets, watching her with that look he gets when he forgets about quarterly reports and remembers he's someone's father first. They don't see me watching them. That's fine. I see them. And I know with a bone-deep certainty I never had in my first 60 years that I am not an extra in this scene. I'm part of it. I'm loved. I'm needed. I'm home.